My name's Sully. I run a bar a ways out from anywhere, affectionately called the Spaces in Between. Now, don't judge. Right? I didn't fucking name it. My companion's Cheddar, a Bernese mountain dog that understands the word attack, kill, stun, and defend, but not the word breakfast. We try to create a welcoming but chill atmosphere for the patrons that stumble through here every now and then. I mean, to be honest, we have to. Because to say my clientele is unusual would be a gross understatement. Kinds of folks who get here are looking for an escape. A place where they can talk their troubles away for a nominal fee and won't be judged. I guess that doesn't separate it from many other bars out there, does it? Not only am I a superb listener, but we have a wide selection of unusual beverages. I like to think of them as mood enhancers, depending on the patron's desire, dampeners. I've gotten together with some unrecognized genius brewery masters working out deals to sell their phenomenal mixtures at a unique place. It brings the customers in by the droves to seek their poison of choice they can't find anywhere else. The brewery gets exposure, so everybody wins. I guess for me, I knew sharing some of the stories that I'd picked up along the way would be of interest to you. And who knows, maybe you'll stop by yourselves one day. But you don't pay in cash here. You pay with stories. Have you ever worked at a bar before? You know, the happy-go-lucky environment you see in a show like Cheers or on a weekend filled with excitable youth. There's nothing like the dreary reality of a bar. Midweek Tuesday will forever serve as my motivator to abstain from booze, and it's one of these midweek Tuesdays that I want to begin our stories. First patron's a bona fide regular, Catherine Letty. She spends every waking moment with her lips around a bottle of Peruvian beer called Mama Killa's Purse Thumper. Contents designed to bring your mood and excitement up to such a level that you felt the world around you was virtually throbbing. For someone like Letty, though, it simply evened her out. I liked Letty. She was a woman who couldn't stop talking about her life, but always seemed to have something interesting tucked up her sleeve or a way about her that turned a mundane story into one of intrigue. She once spent 15 minutes telling me about the watering of her plants and the way her system worked, before taking a left turn into how her giant pitcher plant was fed some of her experimental alcohol and it ate her cat. Got home one day and Methuselah, was just gone, she said between swigs, her youthful face riddled with stress lines, bags under her eyes, and a mess of unkempt brown hair, the majority tied back with a clip, fringe leaving streaks down her face to complement the streaks of booze running down her chin when she downed too much in one go. With a name like that, maybe it was a godsend, I thought, wiping down the counter while looking at her and offering a vocal affirmation of my condolences. She downed the rest of the booze and slammed the bottle down, swaying as she looked up at me. "You know why I came here, Sully?" she asked, her eyes half open and a jovial grin forming across her face as the effects kicked in. Same as everyone else who frequents a bar like mine, I suppose. You want to go somewhere away from prying eyes and drink without being judged. I shrugged, letting the rag fall across my shoulder as I wrung my hands. Maybe the booze, too? You can't say we're not unique in that regard. Nah. Come here because I had nowhere else to go, where I could wallow, she declares, enunciating the words nowhere and wallow for dramatic effect as she spun in a circle. She pushes some coins my way, and I grab another pulse thumper for her. But she shakes her head before I can pop the cap. "No, I want something else, Sully," I want the pincer, she says, pointing a shaking digit to the shelf behind me where my top stock sat. An assortment of bottles of different shapes and sizes adorned with labels and logos of equally unique measure. I followed the trajectory of her finger as it landed on a brown bottle with a square center, the liquid settling neatly as it extended out on either side, following up and into jagged glass spikes that formed two huge pincers. If you looked at it through the beer goggles that I'm 99% certain Letty had on, the glass could pass as a stag beetle. I didn't reach for it, instead pressing both my hands onto the table and pushing her money back to her. Don't pay for top-shelf goods with money, Letty. Tell me a story, and if it's good, I'll pour you that drink. She sighed, a hiccup escaping her lips. My money's not good enough for you. I smile and shake my head. No, but your stories are, so. Tell me what happened that day you came home from work. It's raining, right? Forgotten your raincoat? How did you? Yeah. It was freezing out and I'd had to get some supplies. Said Hurricane Xander was coming in and I wanted to be ready. Her eyes sobered over and her hands shook. She tried to steady them as she cast her eyes to the floor. Thought he'd be okay for just a few minutes. And he was just around the corner. I stared at her for a few moments and twirled my mustache. Cheddar was asleep next to me, his drool beginning to coat the floor, as he had a habit of falling asleep with his favorite stuffed animal in his mouth. I looked at Letty's posture and tremble in her limbs as she fooled with her sleeves and the hesitation in her words. I began to wonder. I sighed and reached for a bottle on the top shelf. It was a delicate orange at the bottom. The shape was akin to an egg with deep cracks down the middle, allowing it for a far brighter shade of yellow to break through. The top was cracked open with the head of a baby chick popping out, blind and screaming, the open mouth serving as the distributor for the drink. A label across the middle of the egg read, Abacus & Sons Whirlwind Milkum Concoction. One shot, and you'll feel the day start anew. I pulled it down and grabbed the shot glass from under the bar. It was clear, and the initials SR were written across it in beautiful black calligraphy. I poured it as she stared aimlessly, and I pushed it toward her. This isn't a pincer, she began, staring at the bubbling orange liquid in front of her. I came here for the pincer because I heard it. What it does isn't important anymore, Letty. As your expert bartender, I've decided this is the better drink for you. Trust me. I pushed a contact number on my phone and nodded to her as she hesitantly downed the shot. An audible hiss emanated from her chest as she breathed out a yellow smoke. Your taxi will be here in a minute. Time to go, I said, detaching myself and beginning to prep the bar for the next patron. I don't... What does this do? She asked, the realization beginning to take her as she put her head in her hands. I feel faint. What? Why did you do this? Go home, Letty, I said almost coldly. If you have any trouble, you can come back, okay? She struggles to get to her feet and rubs her arms as she headed for the door. Small thanks, I guess, as she leaves. I assure you I was doing her a kindness. Letty was going to make a very, very big mistake, and I didn't want to see further harm come to her. A few moments later, I heard the doors swing open as a skinny hipster sauntered in, no older than 25, and his thick black locks greased back into an undercut. His Armani suit that usually impressed so many people did nothing to flatter me. He stared around at the bar, scoffing a couple times as he looked at the signs and plaques on the walls, before rolling his eyes at the whole place and taking a seat in front of me. This was the ever-intolerable Gomez Di Stefano, and I didn't want him anywhere near Letty. This dude has problems with socializing the way incels have problems with dating. Jen is special yesterday, he says, looking down disapprovingly of Cheddar and back to me. Make sure your fucking dog stays away from my drink. Comes near my suit and I swear I'll kick him. Cheddar looks up at me with sleepy eyes, puffs out a sound of protest before sinking his face into his paws to sleep. Then I laugh as I find the bottle. We'd be on the floor in 5 seconds, begging him to not chomp off your salami slice, Gomez, I call from under the bar, finally finding the cooler. Inside were a set of aged vials, split evenly down the middle, the left a deep blue, the right an intense magenta. The label reading, Estefani Brewery Company presents the ultimate emotional experience in Janice. All emotions, 2 sides, 1 bottle. I pull it up and motion Gomez which side he'd like. He picks the blue, and I oblige, pouring it into a tall glass with some ice. What brings you to my ever-so-fine establishment, Gomez? I ask, putting the cooler on the counter and knowing full well that I'll need more of them soon. Gomez drank profusely once he began. I needed somewhere I could go to talk, and this place is the only one I was told wouldn't judge me. His eyes were welling up with tears, and he looked morose. I dare say pathetic, in the right light, but since this is what he wanted by taking that concoction, I didn't hold much sympathy for him. All right, what do you want to talk about? Is it what you told me about last time? I ask, watching for any spillage of tears I'd need to dutifully mop up from my beautiful mahogany counter. The stealing thing? Nah. I don't feel too bad about that part. It's what I saw while I was stealing. It fucked with me. I don't know if I'll ever sleep well again. God, I should have done something. He buries his head in his forearms and sobs. Cheddar snorting before getting up, stretching, and walking off to the back. Even he wasn't buying this shit. I lean forward, my arms folded, and press him for more. What did you see that night, Gomez? He composes himself and looks up, snot running down his face that he quickly wipes away. The apartment I scouted was simple. It wasn't in a busy area. The broad who lived there wasn't a threat. Neighborhoods minded their own business. I could go about my job without incident. My client would get paid nicely. I was told to get a specific item, to do it at a specific time. Only I saw an opportunity and decided to get it early on account of the weather. The weather. What was so important about that? I narrowed my eyes as he began to widen, clearly impressed with himself. Hurricane season. There's a fresh one on the horizon, even quieter than usual, so I stepped into the apartment without any problems after I knew the broad had left. Began to do my thing, searching for her lockbox. But as I went into her bedroom, I heard something coming from the living room. It was this awful sound, like a bear rummaging through trash, but wetter. Right? I heard the sound of wailing and crunching as I saw a shadow cast over the wall, hunched over, and the jaws just tearing at whatever was in there. The pincer-like arms holding it in place as mandibles ripped and tore. He retched and took a moment to steady himself. I listened intently, the uncomfortable sensation of familiarity running through me. I can't get the fucking image out of my head even now. I got what I needed. I bugged out, handed my shit to the client, never said a word. I came here to forget. To get it out of my fucking head. He shook in his seat and reached for the other half of the bottle with the magenta mixture, downing it so quickly that splotches fell and stained his suit. You got this upset over someone's kitten being eaten? I don't buy that, I asked, reaching for a bottle on the top shelf, a golden heart with vines growing around it, and a rusted key in the center, producing a beautiful oaken hue. The label reading, Winchester's very own hemlock-infused agitator. Your first step in the right direction was choosing this drink. His bravado returned, save for a slight shaking in his knee, and he laughed at me as I asked, what can I say? I mean, I'm a softie, right? Hearing a kitten screaming was upsetting. Besides, why wouldn't someone be freaked the fuck out for seeing a shadow eating it, huh? I mean, I thought you types are meant to be insightful. I grabbed a shot glass, and after turning the key on the heart, a satisfying click ran out, and I poured the shimmering contents for him. It's on the house, Gomez, I replied dryly, as he looked uncertain. I gotta get moving soon, Chief. Can't be having too many. He pushed it back to me, apprehension now clear in his voice, not even bothering to ask for the remaining stack of Janus that I'd gotten for him. You won't need to worry. The taxis aren't available yet. Sit and drink. I'll give you a little insider info. I smile, leaning my knuckles onto the counter as I look at the pathetic creature in front of me. He sits gingerly, and after a few moments takes the agitator drink and downs it, heartily. No sooner than he had done so, his entire being froze. His limbs no longer obeying him, his eyes fixed forward and onto me, the body betraying his soul entirely. I'm no longer smiling as I speak aloud while clearing the bar away for the mess. You are a superb thief, Gomez. It's how you can afford the suits, the nice cars, the temporary friends around you who'd feign interest in sex to get loans, but you are a very, very bad liar. I look deeply into his face as I finish my sentence, the disgust in my expression apparent as he looks back in fear. You want to know how I know you didn't see a kitten in that apartment? How I know you saw more than you're letting on, and even why you really didn't report it? He blinks once at me, a confirmation. Well, first, we need to discuss what you just drank. It's a drink that will determine what happens to you next, essentially. One of my very own special blends, designed to weed out cancerous cells like you. If you've got nothing to hide, you'll feel elation. Beyond your wildest dreams, you'll get into the taxi without issue. But if you even feel a shred of guilt in you after I'm done talking, well, I walk around the bar and put my hands on his shoulders, leaning in as I speak to him. Let's come back to that later, shall we? I know you didn't see a kitten because I just served your victim a few minutes ago, and funnily enough, she said it was a kitten too, which, with some degree of confusion, right? She came here to suffer, not entirely willingly, but that was her intention. I don't know what you gave her, but it took a very special blend to help her memory recover. I don't even know if that's the right call, but it's what has to happen. She'll wake up and everything she went through will be there to greet her like a fucking parasite. I lean towards him, my voice becoming low. But I did her a favor, Gomez. I gave her a chance to take a different path than the one you and your client sought out for her. Gomez began to shake, his entire body bouncing up and down as his pupils dilated and his head shook. I don't doubt you have no idea who or what your client is, what is in Letty's lockbox, or that you're very, very sorry, but people like you never learn. You'll save your own skin the moment this happens again, and unfortunately for you, I know it will happen again. The thing I can't forgive, though, myself if I let you go because you saw something in that room and you still ignored an impulse to do right. You saw something that would turn anyone else's stomach, push their fight or flight instinct, and still, you chose yourself. I turn my back to him and pour myself a magenta shot of Janice, downing it as I hear the sizzling of Gomez's body begin to crescendo. You deserve what you get. The form that housed Gomez begins to melt away. The skin and bones begin to burn as his limbs sagged and eventually fell from the torso, continuing to burn and melt on the floor. Gomez tries to scream through the foam that coats his throat, but a soft gurgling is all that's audible as his head sinks into his torso. And that too melts into a viscous sludge, hardens as soon as it settles. Cheddar walks back in, his head nudges my hand as I pet him. My face stuck in a permanent scowl as I look at the ultrasound photo Letty had left behind. He saw a crib, Gomez. You saw a fucking crib. I was about 4 hours into a 6-hour drive when I realized I needed to stop. Not just for gas, but because I was falling asleep at the wheel. My eyes kept drifting shut for half a second at a time. The thing where you blink and suddenly you're 50 feet further down the road than you thought you were. You know? I turned up the music and I rolled down the window, but the cold air only helped for a few minutes. I needed caffeine. The highway was empty. I hadn't seen another car in at least 20 minutes. When I saw the glow of a gas station sign up ahead, I felt relief. It was one of those old independent places, not a chain. The kind that looks like it hadn't been updated since the 80s. A single building with 2 pumps out front and a hand-painted sign that said, "Last stop for 70 miles. I pulled in and parked at the pump. The lot was empty except for a beat-up truck parked around the side of the building. Figured it belonged to whoever was working the night shift. I got out, I stretched my legs, and I filled my tank, paid at the pump, and I headed inside. I should have just gotten back in my car and left, but I needed that coffee, and I needed to use the bathroom, so I walked inside. The store was small, a few aisles of snacks and car supplies, a coffee station in the back corner with those glass pots that had probably been sitting on the burner for hours, a cooler full of sodas and energy drinks along the back wall. The lights were that harsh fluorescent kind that made everything look slightly off. The attendant was behind the counter. He was maybe 50, with thinning gray hair and a face that looked like it hadn't slept in days. He had the TV on, some late-night infomercial with the sound turned low. He looked up when I walked in, and something in his expression changed, just for a second, like he was surprised to see me, or worried. "Evening," he said. "Hey, just grabbing a coffee." I walked to the back and poured myself a cup. It was burnt and bitter, but I didn't care. I just needed the caffeine to get me through the next 2 hours. I grabbed the candy bar, too, and brought everything to the counter. The attendant rang me up slowly, kept glancing past me towards the windows toward my car. "Driving alone?" he asked. "Yeah. Long trip. A few more hours." He nodded, but didn't say anything else. He was staring at the window again. I turned to look, but there was nothing out there, just my car at the pump. Empty highway beyond. "Something wrong?" I asked. He looked at me for a long moment, then he slid a piece of paper across the counter. A napkin. He had written on it with a pen. "You're being followed. Don't go back to your car." I stared at the napkin, then I looked back at him. His face was completely serious. "What are you talking about?" He held up a hand. "Keep your voice low and look at the monitor." He pointed to a small security screen mounted on the wall behind the counter. It showed a black and white feed of the parking lot. My car was there, and someone was standing next to it. My stomach dropped. The figure was on the passenger side, just standing there, facing the store. I couldn't make out any features. They were wearing black clothes. Their face was in shadow. I spun around and looked out the window. There was no one there. Just my car. Empty lot. Nothing. I looked back at the monitor. The figure was still there, standing in the same spot. What the hell? I whispered. Doesn't show up when you look directly, the attendant said. Only on cameras. I don't know why, I don't know what it is, but I know what happens to people when you go out there when it's waiting for them. My heart was pounding. I looked out the window again. Nothing. Back at the monitor. The figure had moved. It was closer to the front of my car now, still facing the store. This is insane, I said. This has to be some kind of trick. I wish it was. He reached under the counter and pulled out a folder. Insides were printed news articles, missing persons report, headlines about bodies found on the highway. 4 people in the last 8 months, he said. All of them stopped here late at night. All of them went back to their cars. Even after I warned them, they found them a few miles down the road. Cars stopped in the middle of the highway, engines still running, drivers still in their seats. Eyes open. No marks on them. Coroner said their hearts just stopped. I felt dizzy. This couldn't be real. I looked at the articles. Photos of victims, young woman, a middle-aged man, a couple in their 30s. Real people, real deaths. Why haven't the police done anything? I asked. Done what? There's nothing to investigate. No signs of foul play, no witnesses, just people dying on a lonely stretch of road. Happens all the time. They chalk it up to fatigue or medical emergencies. I looked at the monitor again. The figure was even closer now, standing right in front of my car. How long does it stay? I asked. Till sunrise, usually, sometimes longer. If you stay inside, you're safe. Can't come in here. Why not? He shrugged. I don't know. Stopped asking questions like a month ago. Just know the rules. Stay inside when it's dark. Don't go out to the lot and wait for daylight. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him he was crazy. But I couldn't explain the figure on the monitor. I couldn't explain why it wasn't there when I looked with my own eyes. Okay, I said. I'll wait. He looked relieved. Good. Smart. You can sit in the back if you want. There's a couch. Got some magazines. It's only about 4 hours till sunrise. He walked to the front door and locked it. The click of the deadbolt was loud in the quiet store. Just in case, he said. Sometimes people panic and try to run. This way you won't do anything stupid. Something about the way he said it made me uncomfortable. But I told myself that he was just being cautious. He was trying to help. I sat down on a stool near the counter. The attendant went back to watching his infomercial. Every few minutes, I'd look at the monitor, and the figure was always there, sometimes in a different position, sometimes closer to the building, but always there. After about an hour, I asked if I could use the bathroom. He pointed to a door near the back of the store. Right through there. And I got up and walked towards it. As I passed the counter, I glanced at the security monitor again. Something was different. It took me a second to realize what it was. The timestamp. The footage showed 11:47 p.m., but it was after 3 a.m. now. I checked my phone when I came back inside. It was definitely past 2. I stopped walking. I looked at the monitor more carefully. The footage wasn't live. It was a loop. The same few minutes playing over and over. My blood went cold. I looked out the window of my car. I really looked this time. There was no one out there. There had never been anyone out there. I kept my voice calm. Hey, what time does the camera say? He didn't answer for a second, and when I turned around, he was standing right behind me. You should use the bathroom, he said. His voice was different now, flatter. You've been holding it for a while. The timestamp's wrong, I said. That footage is old. His expression didn't change. He just stared at me with those tired eyes. You saw the article, he said. You saw what happens to people on this highway. This could be from anywhere. Anyone could print those. He took a step towards me. I took a step back. You should stay, he said. It's not safe out there. I looked at the door. Locked. The deadbolt needed a key from this side. Where's the key? I asked. I can't let you leave, not until morning, for your own safety. I backed up further. My hand found the door handle to the back room. I pushed it open and stepped through. It wasn't a break room. It was a storage room. Dim light from a single bulb. Shelves lined the walls, and on the shelves were boxes, dozens of them, each one labeled with a date. I opened the nearest one. Inside was a wallet, a phone with a cracked screen, a set of car keys, a driver's license, the photo showing a young woman, blonde hair, smiling. I recognized her from the articles. I opened another box, different items, different license. Middle-aged man. He hadn't been warning these people, he'd been taking them. I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around, and he was standing in the doorway, blocking the exit. You always figure it out, he said, but by then it's too late. No cell signal out here, nearest town's 40 miles. No one to hear you scream. He was holding something. The length of cord. I backed into the shelves, my hand closed around something heavy, a wrench, old and rusted but solid. You don't want to do this, he said. It'll be easier if you just cooperate. He stepped forward and I swung. The wrench connected with the side of his head. He staggered sideways and hit the wall. I didn't wait to see if he went down. I ran past him through the doorway into the main store. The front doors were still locked. I grabbed the stool from the counter and swung it at the glass window. It cracked but didn't break. I swung it again and again. I could hear him behind me getting up and cursing. The third swing went through. I knocked out the remaining glass with a stool and climbed through the window frame. Shards cut my arms and legs, but I didn't care. I dropped onto the pavement outside and ran for my car. My keys were still in my pocket, phone still in the cup holder where I left it. I got in, so I started the engine, and in the rearview mirror, I saw him stumbling through the broken window. I floored it. I drove for an hour without stopping. When I finally pulled over at a rest stop, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. Sitting in my car now, doors locked, engine running. I called 911. They're sending someone to the gas station. Told me to stay where I am and wait for an officer to come take my statement. I keep checking my mirrors. I keep expecting to see headlights behind me. The sun's coming up now. I can see the sky turning gray on the horizon. I should feel relieved, but I don't. Because when I climbed through the window, when I ran to my car and I looked back at the store, I saw that security monitor through the broken glass. The figure was still on the screen. It was standing in the lot, but it wasn't by my car anymore. It was standing exactly where I had been standing when I broke the window. I don't know what he had playing on that monitor, but I don't know if it was really a loop or something else entirely. I don't know if he made it all up to scare people into staying, or if there was some truth buried under the lies. All I know is that I'm never driving this highway again. And if you ever see a gas station sign that says, last stop for 70 miles, just keep driving. Whatever's waiting there, you don't want to find out. Hey there kids, it's me, Mr. Creepypasta, and before we get started on tonight's story, I'm going to let you know about a new novel from tonight's author. Beneath the Wound, Book 1, The Revenant Directive, available now by Justice Figueroa, in the link in the description down below. You can grab it on Amazon, and believe me, it really helps out for you guys to be able to support authors, especially if you like the work you hear on the channel or on the podcast. And now, on to tonight's story. The forecast said, snow showers. That's the exact phrase that got me to throw my pack in the trunk like I was beating the clock on some fun little weekend reset. Snow showers. By the time I reached the pull-off, the world was already turning white in that slow, steady way that makes you feel like you're inside a shaken snow globe. It wasn't blizzard conditions yet, just thick flakes and wind that kept changing its mind. Kind of weather where you can still hear your own boots in the powder and convince yourself you're fine. I signed the trail register with a pen that didn't want to work. My glove made my handwriting look like a toddler's. There was one other name above mine from earlier that morning. No notes. No back by sunset. Just a name and a time that felt too early to still matter. The first half mile in, I started second-guessing myself, not because I was scared, because every tree looked the same, and snow eats landmarks. Trail blazes disappear when they got frosting on them. Tracks turn into soft dents, and then into nothing. Your world shrinks to whatever your headlamp hits, and mine wasn't even on yet. I kept going away because that's how I am. If I've committed to something, I'll drag it behind me like a bad decision on a leash. I picked a spot the way I always do, not too close to water, not in a low pocket where cold air settles, not under dead branches. A little rise off the trail with a couple of thick trunks to break the wind. Nothing dramatic. Just a place that looked like it'd still be there when I woke up. Setting up in the snow is never graceful. I stamped out a rectangle with my boots until the powder packed down, dug out a shallow trench for my vestibule so I wouldn't be crawling into a drift, anchored my guy lines with buried sticks because the ground was too frozen for stakes. My fingers went numb halfway through. I told myself it was fine because I had a sleeping bag rated way colder than this, and a stove, and those little hand warmers that smell like pennies when they would heat up. It should have been simple. It should have been cold. While I worked, the woods kept doing that thing where it goes quiet in patches. Not the normal snow muffled sound quiet, I mean the kind where you realize you haven't heard a bird in a while. No squirrel chatter, no little taps from branches. Just wind and the soft hiss of snow landing on nylon. The first time I noticed, I actually stopped. And I listened I expected someone to clear their throat behind a tree, you know. It's nothing. I finished pitching the tent and went to fetch more deadfall for a small fire. Not to be dramatic, you know, just because fire makes the dark feel less personal. That's when I saw the tracks. They weren't mine. I mean, mine were boot-shaped, you know, predictable. These were longer, like someone had taken a shovel and dragged it, toe first. A single line of impressions deep enough to show wet under the powder, each one spaced too far apart to be walking normally. I followed them without thinking. 10 steps, 20. They went in a straight line between two stands of pine, and then they stopped at a scoured patch where the wind had polished the snow down to hardpack near exposed stone. No clear turn, no tidy return trail, just the last drag mark faded into a surface that didn't hold detail the way fresh powder does. I stood there with my gloved hand still gripping a dead branch, staring at the last mark until the storm started filling everything in. The wind picked up, a spray of powder hit my face, and that's when I heard something behind me. No footsteps, more like a slow drag. Like someone pulling a heavy bag over crusted snow. I whipped around fast enough to almost lose my balance, and all I saw was the thinning light between trees and my own breath, and the start of my boot trail back to camp. The dragging sound stopped the second I turned. I did the thing you're not supposed to do. I called out, "Hello?" My voice sounded wrong, like it didn't belong in the woods. No answer, of course. I told myself it was a branch. A deer. The wind moving a downed log, anything that fit into the normal world. Then I noticed something I hadn't the first time. Those long tracks weren't centered the way a person would be. They weren't two parallel lines like skis either. They were slightly off, like whatever made them had one side of its body heavier than the other. Like it leaned. I carried the branch back to camp and tried to shake it off. I got my fire going with a little stove fuel and stubbornness. The flame fought the wind, but didn't quit. It popped, it snapped like it was annoyed. I ate a sad dinner standing up. Instant noodles in a metal cup, because sitting on snow makes your body remember exactly what heat is worth. I kept turning my head to check the trees, not because I saw anything, but because my brain kept insisting I should. The storm thickened in layers. It wasn't just snow now. It was snow with teeth. Gusts that shoved it sideways, flakes stinging my cheeks, visibility dropping until the firelight felt like a little island. Everything outside it was just a wall. I crawled into the tent early, not because I was tired. Because being outside started to feel like being watched through frosted glass. Inside, everything was close and loud. Nylon breathing, zippers clicking, my sleeping bag squeaking every time I shifted. I stripped off wet layers and stuffed them into a bag so they wouldn't freeze into boards. I checked my phone. It's no service, obviously. The battery already draining faster than it should be in the cold. I lay there with my headlamp off, listening. Wind, snow, tent fabric snapping. Then very faint, then a drag again. Not outside the tent. Further out, somewhere between the tree line and the trail. Drag. Pause. Drag. Pause. Drag. I held my breath like that mattered. The dragging got closer, slow, patient. I sat up and turned my headlamp on. The beam turned the inside of my tent into a bright little fish tank. I stared at the nylon like I could see through it if I stared hard enough. Drag. Pause. Then something touched the outside of the tent. Not a gust, not snow sliding, a pressure, deliberate, like a palm placed flat against it. The fabric bowed inward and held. I didn't move. I don't mean I stayed calm. I mean my body went rigid in a way that felt automatic. Pressure slid just a little, like whatever was out there was feeling along the seam. It stopped near the zipper. I grabbed my knife. I always carry a small, fixed blade for camping stuff, cutting cords, shaving, kindling. I mean, it looked stupid in my hand suddenly, like bringing a pocket knife to an argument with the weather. The fabric at the zipper pulled, not the zipper itself, the fabric around it, like fingers trying to find purchase. I didn't think. I lunged forward and shoved both hands against the door, pushing back from the inside, tried to keep whatever it was from getting any leverage. For a second, there was resistance. Real resistance. Something solid. And then the pressure vanished. The tent snapped back into place. Silence. I sat there in that awful bright circle of headlamp light, sweating in my base layer, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing happened. And that was worse, right? After a few minutes, I forced myself to breathe normally. I clicked the headlamp to red mode, unzipped the door just enough to look out. Snow blasted it immediately, cold and sharp. I squinted into it. The beam of my light got swallowed fast. Just a short cone before it dissolved into white. I couldn't see anything. But I could see the marks. There were fresh impressions right outside my vestibule, partially filling with snow. No boot prints, no animal tracks, those long, leaning drags ending inches from my door, and mixed in with them, very faint, with thinner lines, like something with nails, claws, like they'd raked the snow as it moved. The prints didn't lead away, they circled my tent. Not a clean circle, more like it had paced around, stopping, staring, doubling back, then pressing close again. I zipped the tent shut so hard the teeth snagged. And that's when I heard it. A sound that made my stomach drop because it was trying badly to be familiar. It was a voice. Not a word, not a sentence. Just a low, throaty attempt at the shape of a human sound. The way a parrot can mimic a laugh without understanding it. It came from somewhere beyond the trees, past the edge of my light. It went, "Hey." Soft, almost polite. Then silence. Then closer. "Hey." The second one had more breath in it, more confidence. I pressed my mouth onto my sleeve to keep my own breathing quiet, like a kid hiding under covers. "Hey." I tried again. So close, I felt it more than heard it, like the nylon was carrying the vibration. The voice was wrong in a way I can't explain without sounding dramatic. It wasn't scary because it was loud. It was scary because it wasn't quite right, like something had listened to people speak from far away and decided it could do it too. My headlamp beam shook as my hand shook. The tent wall bulged inward again. This time it didn't feel like a palm. This time it felt like a face pressed into it. I saw the shape of it in the nylon, an oval with ridges like bone or cartilage. The fabric stretched across it and held, showing the suggestion of where eyes would be, where a mouth would be. The mouth moved. Cold. Then with a little laugh, it sounded like someone choking. You cold. I don't know why that broke me, but it did. I kicked at the wall where its head was pressed hard enough to make my heel sting. The shape snapped back, the nylon popped outward. Outside, something made a noise like wet fabric being pulled apart. Then the dragging started again, faster, circling. Drag, 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 drag. The whole tent shivered with each pass, like it was brushing against it, bumping it, testing it. I grabbed my car keys, not because I was going to drive, because the alarm button felt like the only weapon I had that wasn't a joke. I crawled into my boots, hands shaking so bad I missed the laces twice. I stuffed my sleeping bag into its sack without rolling and just crammed it down, threw what I could into my pack half-zipped. I had one thought, clear and bright in my head: get to the car. The storm was thick enough that I couldn't see the trail from my tent. I had to follow my own boot line by feel, like reading Braille with my feet. I unzipped the tent and I bolted out. The cold hit me so hard it made my eyes water instantly. Snow slapped my face. Wind shoved my pack like it wanted me on the ground. I took 3 steps and almost fell because the snow had drifted into my boot prints. Behind me something moved. Not dragging now, running. It hit my tent on the side with a heavy thump, like it had launched itself at it the second I left, and the whole structure collapsed in on itself. Poles flexed, snapped back, and then folded. My little island of shelter crumpled like a kicked soda can. That gave me a horrible, vivid image of being angry that I was leaving. So I ran. My headlamp beam bouncing wildly, making the woods strobe. Trees appeared and vanished. My own breath sounded like an engine failing. Then something grabbed my pack. It yanked me back so hard my spine jolted. I went down on one knee, pack straps biting into my shoulders. My first thought was that a branch had hooked it, and then the pack moved sideways, smooth and strong, and I realized whatever had it was pulling. I twisted around and my light hit it for just a half second. It was low to the ground, but long. Too long. Its body was pale in a way that didn't look like fur or skin, more like packed snow pressed into the shape of something alive. It had limbs, but they didn't bend right. They hinged, too, many times, and its head looked like it was wearing a face that didn't fit it. Like it had pressed a mask of frozen skin onto bone. The mouth opened, and I saw dark inside, wet and wrong. It didn't roar, didn't snarl. It went softly like it was still practicing. Hey. And then it jerked again, trying to pull me off the trail. I did the only thing that made sense. I let my pack go. The strap slipped off my shoulders, and the thing went with it, tugging it into the white like it was weighing nothing at all. I scrambled up and I sprinted. Behind me, the dragging returned for a second as it adjusted, and then it came after me with a new sound, a rapid tapping like nails on crushed snow. I could hear it gaining. My foot punched through a thin crust, and I went down hard, my shin smacking something buried beneath. Rock or root, I still don't know. Pain flashed hot and then went oddly dull. I tried to get up, but my leg didn't want to cooperate. I forced it anyway, half running, half limping, tears freezing at the corner of my eyes. My headlamp beam caught the trail register sign ahead like a miracle, a reflective rectangle in the storm. The pull-off was close. I hit the edge of the lot and saw my car as a dark shape under white. I fumbled my keys so bad I dropped them. I had to find them by feeling in the snow, fingers clawing panic, making everything clumsy. I got them, I jammed the key into the door, I yanked it open, nearly falling into the seat. The tapping sound was right behind me now. I slammed the door. The car rocked. Something hit the side hard enough to make the whole damn frame creak. I locked the doors out of instinct. Like a lock meant anything against whatever that was. The windshield was already frosting, snow plastered against it. I turned the key and the engine coughed once, then nothing. Battery cold-soaked. The car had decided to join the storm in being useless. Another impact, this time on the hood. I looked up through the windshield and saw the shape on the glass, inches away, sliding down slowly. Not a face, not fully, just a pale oval, pressing against the windshield from the other side, leaving a smeared patch where frost melted under it. The mouth moved, muscled through glass. "You cold," it said. Then it made the choking laugh again. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely press the panic button, but I did. The car erupted into noise, horns blaring, lights flashing, a ridiculous, desperate alarm in the middle of nowhere. The shape flinched. It peeled off the hood and dropped into the snow, that long, jointed motion. The head turned towards the sound like it didn't understand it, like it was hearing a new kind of animal. It took a step back, and then another. I hit the ignition again and again, begging the engine like it was a person. On the fourth try, it caught. The heater fan whined weakly. The headlights cut through the snow in two pale tunnels. I threw the car into reverse without thinking about traction, and the tires spun, then grabbed, then slid. I fishtailed, corrected, and backed onto the road like I was fleeing a burning building. In my rearview mirror, through the chaos of white, I saw it standing at the edge of the lot, not chasing now, just watching. It lifted one arm slowly, like someone waving goodbye. Then it raised its hand to its mouth, pressed fingers against it and moved them like it was shaping sound. "Hey," it said one last time. And it sounded closer to normal than it should have. I drove until I heard pavement that looked plowed and saw lights in the distance. The shaking didn't stop. My shin had swollen under my pants, and when I finally dared to pull over somewhere with a street lamp, I saw blood seeping through the fabric where I'd slammed it on whatever was under that snow crust. The next morning, after I'd gotten my leg looked at, I went to the ranger station. I asked about the other name on the trail register. The woman behind the counter went still for a second, told me the register wasn't for public discussion, and that if I wanted information, I'd file a report. She didn't meet my eyes when she said that. At urgent care, they did an x-ray and told me nothing was broken, then rinsed the cut, put in a few stitches anyway because the rock had split me open clean through the skin. And I kept replaying the way those drag marks circled my tent, stopping at the zipper like it knew what that seam meant. I kept thinking about the way it practiced that one word over and over like it was trying to get the tone right. And every time I caught myself wanting to write it off as some kind of storm panic, I remember the pressure of something solid through the tent wall and the sound it made when it peeled away wet and wrong. And I haven't slept outside since. A single cloud floated in dark, brooding silence. It interrupted a tapestry of perfect blue, where the Sargasso Sea met an azure sky on the sun-bleached Miami coast. It could be seen from every property on the beachfront. It had no evident purpose. It had no discernible effect on anything. Nevertheless, it was there. On a sun-baked penthouse balcony, a frustrated videographer wrestled with a light reflector and camera, while enduring a barrage of narcissistic self-obsession. "Bro, no cap, what's with the weather? Think I could be out here with clouds in the background? I need the shot to be peak perfection, just like me. Gotta be flawless." The owner of the voice and the penthouse was Blake Jonas. He was sitting on the edge of a long pool overlooking the generous roof terrace and its private tiki bar and the conversation fire pit. But none of that seemed to be making him happy right now. "Yo, set up right here, bro. Like, by the bar, then we get a clear backdrop. Do I have to think of everything?" "Sorry, man. My bad," the videographer replied, sucking in a sigh. "You're Toby's brother, right? Where is he and the boys?" Blake asked, looking at his watch. "Yeah, I'm Dan. You sent Toby and the others out for iced coffees and the, Dan's voice trailed off. "And what?" Blake demanded. Dan's face strained as he looked around. He was out of his comfort zone, not wanting to say the word out loud. "You know, the other thing you wanted them to get." "Oh, yo, the girls are the party favors," Blake replied at full volume. "So, you got that sorted? We're trying to flex hard tomorrow." "No, like I said, I only came here," Dan said it patiently, as if explaining to a child. He only met Blake last night, and so far had been far from impressed. "Toby asked me as a special favor to do your video so that he could enjoy the party with you." "Yeah, where's Toby?" Blake said yet again, stuck in a cycle of thought. He wasn't even listening for an answer anymore, just staring to the horizon. Blake was part of the intellectual virus that blighted the 21st century, one of the flood of influencers talented or lucky enough to have gained celebrity status on social media. He had nearly 200 million subscribers, and if you looked at the metadata, you'd realize they were slowly becoming increasingly younger than him. Blake would turn 30 tomorrow, but he didn't think it fair it should happen so soon. He had a legacy to secure, and becoming older wasn't helping. Dan, the videographer, was now set up and ready. This was the only filming Blake intended to do today, a 60-second short before the party tomorrow. As soon as the camera clicked on, it was as if he became someone else. His face lit up, and his whole demeanor became instantly friendly and fully enthused. Hey everybody, welcome to the location of my big party tomorrow. There's going to be a whole lot of influencers coming and some special guests, so look out for a surprise appearance or two tomorrow. I can't say too much, but you know me and my people. Y'all know it's going to be huge. I know some people out here be hating, but I'm sending nothing but love to you all. And this message is your own VIP virtual invitation to join me online here, because the first hour of the party is going live tomorrow. It's gonna be epic. Blake pulled out a custom vape. His vape. A vulgar gold lump. Its diamond finish flashing prisms across his tanned face. He took a deep hit before blowing out a thick white fog of strawberry unicorn tears. It was, of course, his own brand. He savored the moment, then delivered his well-worn catchphrase. We just vapors, forget the haters. Like, subscribe, and don't forget our great new flavors in the shop. Click on the link for my birthday discount, and be sure you check out our new flavor, Optimus Lime. Peace! As soon as he ended, the glass door slid open, and in bounced Blake's entourage. Tanned, teeth gleaming, over-caffeinated. They greeted him with a chorus of tired cliches. VIP, dude! Good things come to those who wait, my man! All good, bro. Blake's smile dropped the moment the camera wasn't rolling. What time do you call this? I've been out here grinding. Chill, man, Zach said, handing over a triple iced frap. We got your fave. Blake sucked on the straw and his mood lifted a little. It was pretty good milkshake as far as coffee went. His mood easing only slightly. All right. Where's my stuff? Zach shifted uneasily. Yeah, about that. Blake glared at him. Look, we scored the usual, no worries. But for the VIP shit, whole different game. This guy only deals one-on-one, face-to-face. Said he only talks to the real star. Blake was incredulous. You're serious? I'm supposed to go myself? Dude's old school, exclusive. Pharrell, Slater, LeBron, all go to him. Said you're the chosen one. The others chimed in with soft agreement. Yeah, man, he's legit. Said he only deals with legends. Blake's ego inflated on cue. Fine. Let's go meet Mystery Man. 1 hour later, Blake's Tesla rolled up in front of a shabby, flat-roofed building in Little Havana, across the road from a supermarket that was short on windows but big on check-cashing services. Some dirty Miami bass blasted from the balcony of a nearby apartment. It was not a tourist hotspot. Half of Blake's posse had come along for support. They were staying in the car whilst Blake went inside. 2 of Blake's mid-level security guys had parked up in a black SUV half a block away with a good line of sight. They had strongly advised Blake against this and, as usual, had been strongly ignored. Better security specialists would not work with clients like Blake because of his attitude. Stepping out of the car, Blake walked up to the ubiquitous palm trees that stood on either side of a reinforced metal doorway. It was only the intercom that gave any sense of confidence that the place was still in use. It appeared to have been machined out of brass, with bake-like buttons straight out of the 1930s and an Art Deco speaker grill. It was not a new piece made to look old, but an old piece that someone had scrupulously managed and polished for the better part of a century. Blake became aware that his mouth had gone dry, and a shiver ran down his spine as he pressed the button, despite the 95-degree air temperature. Looking back to the car, he saw his boys laughing and waving at him. You got this, bro! They mouthed in air-conditioned comfort to the car's double-glazed. Blake threw up his hands in a double shaka sign, fingers and thumbs extended, and was about to shout something back when the intercom buzzed with static as door bolts snapped in like gunshots, making him jump. Blake froze for a moment of rare uncertainty, but then pushed the door open and stepped inside. He entered into a short, dark passageway, lit only by the soft amber glow of the room ahead. A beaded curtain covered the doorway, obscuring a clear view of what to expect. "Come in. Been waiting for you." The voice was deep, dry, and had an almost musical edge to it. Blake pushed on through the curtain to be met by a tall, thin man in an old, dark suit. He was leaning on the far side of a mahogany counter. His head was shaved. It was hard to put an age on him. He could have been anywhere from 35 to a well-kept 70. "Waiting for me?" Blake asked, his eyes glancing around him. He was looking at row upon row of shelving and cupboards, fronts of all sizes, all of them built in that same polished mahogany. It had the feel of an apothecary, but the air smelled like a funeral home. Glass display cabinets sat on the countertops and hugged the far wall, all of them filled with drug paraphernalia. "Yes, sir, waiting for you, but mine not. My time here is of no real importance." Blake watched the tall man brush invisible dust from his sleeves. The place appeared spotless. Just antiquated. Blake double looked at him, thinking, is this guy for real? Then he remembered why he was here. "Alright, cool, man, cool. This place is, kind of interesting. Look, I don't usually do this. And my people said you wouldn't deal with anyone else but me. But honestly, this isn't what I was expecting. You're the guy I need to talk to?" "Indeed. I am the guy," the man said back to him, leaving an uncomfortable silence hanging. Okay, I'm here for the man straightened, gliding up to full height and raising a finger to his lips. Blake realized now this guy wasn't leaning onto the counter. He was ridiculously tall. Easily 7 feet, pro basketball height. Blake puffed himself up subconsciously without realizing it. He was the big man here, and not to be shushed by some creepy dealer. He was about to say something to that effect when again the man spoke. "You're here for the stuff. The package. The shiz. The dope. Of course you are, and I'm here to provide my expertise and my service, ensuring you get exactly what you need. What I offer is not what you find anywhere, for I only deal with a select group of very important people, because what I provide is very important." Blake's ego was sated, and he found himself listening to the melodic rise and fall of the tall man's voice. "Tell me, sir, have you been to a fine restaurant, encountered a sommelier?" About 5 years ago, Blake wouldn't have had a clue what a sommelier was, but that didn't stop him from dropping a fortune at a swanky LA restaurant, filming the whole thing as he and his crew racked up a jaw-dropping tab on vintage wines. The sommelier, some poor guy trying to keep it classy, dutifully poured the finest choices. Blake's crew roasted him on camera, swishing $9,000 of bottled wine like mouthwash before loading it into a super soaker and blasting it into each other's mouths. It was outrageous, tasteless, but still, it had racked up millions of views. Yeah, Blake acknowledged. Wine waiters. The man didn't have any eyebrows, so he had none to raise as he replied. My role is perhaps a similar one. You can get anything you want from the streets, but what I sell is prestige, rarity, history. Do you like to be one with prestige, Blake? Blake nodded as he replied. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, dog. The man continued, unfazed. I deal in what can't be found elsewhere. In 2018, a bottle of Domina della Romani Conti sold for $500,000.
Not for the taste, but because it was the last from the year the war ended. People weren't just drinking wine. They were drinking history. That's what I offer. Provenance. Authenticity. You buy off the street, you get mystery. Here, where it comes from is everything.
Blake was finding himself sold so far on the idea. He hit his vape, throwing out a big cloud above him. Yeah, I think I'm feeling your vibe. So, what you got?
I have anything you want. All from history, he announced, moving to open one of the smaller cabinet drawers behind him with a flourish. Elvis Presley's last packet of Percodan, only one tablet missing. He stooped low to another drawer that hissed when it opened as if hermetically sealed. Heath Ledger's Oxycontin from out of his very pocket. Johnny Cash's Amphetamines, Michael Jackson's Diazepam, Kurt Cobain's 9-bar. You can experience the highs from the greatest icons in history. Is anything of interest to you so far? I have more. Many, many more.
Blake only shrugged his shoulders and sucked at his teeth. This all you got? It's like leftovers from yesterday's celebs? Bro, I'm way bigger than that. Thought this was gonna be something special, you know? This is weird, man. No, I need something bigger. Something like next level.
Bigger than Elvis.
Blake threw out a shit-eating grin with a mock voice saying, I'm bigger than Elvis, baby. Once again, hitting his custom vape to create another huge cloud like a fog machine for his act. As it cleared, Blake's eyes were drawn to something high on the shelf, a gloss-black woven box, intricately carved with letters embossed onto the front edge, picked out in gold leaf, and for a moment, all the world around him seemed to blur into insignificance. What's that, bro? Blake spoke up, pointing. The tall man didn't turn around to follow the direction of Blake's finger. Instead, he simply said, No. No? Blake responded, furrowing his brow.
No, I don't think that's for you.
Yo, fuck you, man. Don't play me. Show me the good shit. I'm not here to get played or have you holding out on me. I'm not here fronting for some chuggy tricks. You even know who I am?
The tall man appeared about to say something, but instead paused and slowly nodded. You are Blake Jonas, famed celebrity influencer and performer.
I'm the celebrity influencer, bro. 200 million subs. Now show me that bad boy up there.
The tall man stretched out his arms, slender fingers wrapping around the box, which he carefully placed upon the counter. Blake could see the golden letters clearly now. HPL. HPL.
That's that. You, like, smoke it?
HPL is not a what, sir. It is a who. Howard Phillips Lovecraft. You, of course, have heard of H.P. Lovecraft.
I never heard of him. Such a cool box, though. What's inside?
Again, sir, I really don't think this is for...
But Blake cut him off, raising a hand up as if stopping traffic. Look, I want something special. I'm not walking out of here with a half strip of Percodan. I need something that will impress. What's inside?
This, sir, was Mr. Lovecraft's personal stash, his own blend of marijuana from 1937, though it's a sealed box. I really couldn't vouch in good conscience as regards to its true potency.
So what did this Lovecraft dude even do? Like, what's his deal?
He was an impeccable writer of horror stories, sir, but only achieved true recognition upon his demise.
He's famous now, though, right? Like, legit?
Oh, yes, sir. He left quite the impression, still influencing works to this very day.
Oh, shit, influencer. He's like me.
You know what, fuck it, I'll take it.
As I said, sir, I don't think this is for you.
Blake looked agitated. He was a man not used to not getting what he wanted. This conversation had swung back, and for too long, Blake thought. He had other shit to do, and he really wanted that box. He clenched his fist as he spoke. Now look, stop being a creepy NPC. I said I'll take it. HP Crafty Love Stash. I'm in. How much? For a split second, the man appeared to grow even taller, and Blake felt that chill he'd experienced earlier return. But the man just nodded before carefully placing the box into a brown paper bag. So what's this gonna hit me for? Blake asked, if not demanded.
No charge, sir. Consider this a gesture of goodwill.
The man replied, a reptilian smile growing ever wider as he handed over the bag. Staring down into Blake's eyes, he added, I look forward to our next transaction. Weird, creepy motherfucker, Blake thought to himself. Makes me go through all this performative bullshit. He doesn't even want my money. Fuck him. I'll never be coming back here. Free stash, though. Another win for Blake. All he said was, okay. Nice one, bro. Before snatching up the paper bag and heading out through the beaded curtain and towards the exit. Just before he reached the door, he heard the man raise his voice one final time from behind. And sir! Blake slowed, half-turned. I hope this birthday delivers everything that you deserve. Blake rolled his eyes. Yeah, whatever. The door clicked open and he emerged squinting into the blazing Miami sun once more. Blissfully ignorant, he'd never mentioned his birthday once. Walking back to the car, he saw his friends talking with his private security. They explained they were just about to go in, as they'd been waiting for him to come back outside for over an hour. No way, man. It was like 5 minutes tops, Blake told him. They just shrugged, knowing better than to contradict him. By the time they arrived back at the penthouse, Blake had distracted himself with his to-do list. Everything needed to be perfect for tomorrow, and the day had gotten away from him. The lift doors opened and they all spilled into the penthouse. Blake headed straight to the glass panoramic doors onto the roof terrace. The fuck is this? Blake exclaimed as his followers joined him. The dark cloud that had been far out at sea that morning had drifted inward, slowly rolling straight towards them and blocking out the ocean view. It churned as it drifted, as if stirred by an invisible hand. "Hey, don't worry, man," said Zach. "It's gonna blow right over." Blake could only shake his head in dismay. "This ain't right, bro. Get it better." But the cloud did not blow over. It rolled ever closer. As they stood watching from the heights of the penthouse, it seemed almost level with them. Zach, sensing Blake's mood darken to match the billowing mass, decided to distract him. "So you never said, what did our VIP dealer hook us up with?" Zach's ploy worked. Blake remembered the dark box and had everyone follow him inside. He pulled it from the bag with a flourish. "Nice," Zach said. "What's the letters for?" asked Toby. "It's this dead famous guy's weed. It's his initials, HPL. L's for Love's Craft. You've heard of him, right?" Zach, Toby, and the others shook their heads. Only Dan, the videographer, spoke up. "You gotten a hold of HP Lovecraft's stash? How can you guys not have heard of him?" "See, Toby, this is what happens when you don't read. The guy was out there. He was the master of, like, cosmic horror, twisted, crazy genius stuff. I wouldn't be touching that for anything. I mean, seriously, guys, you'd probably leave that shit alone." "Well, lucky for us, you're just a video guy and don't know how we party out here," snapped Zach at him, much to the laughter of the others. Dan looked towards Toby, his brother, for a little support. He was out here doing a favor for him, after all. He didn't care much for Blake's content or his character. "Yeah, fuck you, bud. We don't need a babysitter. This here's the good shit, VIP shit from history, Blake announced. Look, you do you, but Toby, don't be doing this, Dan implored his brother. But Toby only seemed embarrassed with his younger brother's protest, caught between family ties and the trappings of celebrity. He made his choice. Why don't you take a walk, man? Grown-ups are gonna light up. Dan's skin flushed red with anger and outrage. He slammed down the camera he'd been holding onto a nearby table and stormed out to the lift. He couldn't stand any more of this bullshit. Woo! They chanted in mocking outrage as the doors slid shut with a sense of finality. Blake perched on an overstuffed sofa as his entourage gathered around him. He found a latch on a small black box and unclipped it. Old rubber seals reluctantly relinquished their grip, and the top swung open to rest on its hinges. Instantly, the unmistakable aroma of weed hit the room, the rich, musky, pungent scent like no other. Notes of pine, sweat, and earth flooded their nostrils. It was hard to believe it was over 90 years old. But maybe it wasn't, thought Blake. Maybe this whole thing was a con. But then again, he hadn't paid anything for it, and it had to be the best-smelling grass he'd ever encountered. With the rain cloud looming outside, what else was there to do, he thought. 5 minutes later, Zach had rolled up a fat cone, just one, just to try it out. Couldn't hurt. And it could take the edge off Blake's mood. He offered it to Blake, but Blake insisted that Zach try it first. No worries, thought Zach. Thumbing his lighter, he sparked up and closed his eyes, drawing deeply. The smoke flooded his lungs and expanded. He sank back into the sofa before finally blowing out a cloud. Well? Asked Blake. Bro, this is bomb, Zach declared with a widening smile. Okay, pass, said Blake, taking it from him and taking a big hit. Each of them passed it in turn, nodding with ever-widening grins and giggles with their appreciation. None of them noticed the dark cloud drift to the glass doors. Not until the glass shattered. What the fuck? Shouted Blake in alarm, spinning around to see the glass spill across the marble floor and a dark shadow flicker through the mist outside. He sprang up. Zach was first to the gap left by the absent door to see the cloud had settled right on top of them. What was that? He shouted, steadying himself as he walked to the broken glass, scrunching underfoot. He looked up. The cloud whirled in slow motion, a circular vortex of grays and blacks that poured mist down to him. Small clips of lightning danced on the edges, self-contained. He looked back to Blake and friends. Bro, you gotta see... A thick gray tentacle arched down from above, wrapping around his torso and head. It seemed to happen instantly. It ripped him in half with a fountain of blood that splashed across the terrace and into the penthouse, splashing across those who had been nearest. Blake's head swelled, no longer feeling like his own. His heart felt twice its usual size, and a thick feeling of nausea flooded through him as he felt rooted to the floor. Two more tentacles now thrust into the room, emerging from a vast dark mass in the cloud's shadow. These were as thick as tree trunks. One smashed Blake aside, cracking his ribs, and it picked up a screaming Toby and flung him against the wall so hard you could hear his skull crack open. Blake turned to run as another thick tentacle suddenly blocked his path before whipping backwards with another two victims, compressing its coils, flicking them into the dark maw of the cloud above. Blake could only watch on in terror as the last member of the entourage crouched down behind a sofa. He tried to shout a warning as the creeping menace slid behind him, but it was too late. A sucker the size of a dinner plate planted itself over the man's face, muffling his cries as it slowly withdrew, grating his body against the broken glass, painting the floor red with his blood. Then there was only Blake left. Ever more tentacles writhed and twisted their way inside, pulsing with malevolence, dripping with foulness. They blocked every exit but for the shattered door. Blake's temples pounded, his stomach retching with fear. Flooded with panic, he ran for it, and as soon as he made it through, he could not help but look up. The clouds swirled with lightning menace, and the thunder rumbled as something vague yet enormous emerged. Blake stared into a pale, sickly light cast from two glowing orbs that stared into him. They were eyes, huge and glowing with feverish yellow malice. Below them, a raging maw of tentacles descended, swaying in a vomit of movement toward him. Out of his mind, with fear, he turned. He ran to the edge. And he jumped. The news report and the original police report were not quite the same. The news reported that Blake Jonas had jumped to his death following a drug-fueled murder spree the night before his 30th birthday. The police report had been different. It was based upon recovered footage from a camera that had been left on a table and still recording. Men in dark suits, government ID, and military sunglasses had collected that original report and that tape within the hour. It didn't show tentacles or otherworldly creatures, but it did show a man being ripped in two by an invisible force, another suddenly being catapulted into a wall, others being levitated, tossed to their deaths. And one last thing it showed before the battery died. It showed a tall, thin figure entering the room and taking an unidentified item from the coffee table before leaving. 50 years later, at an undisclosed location, a quiet transaction is taking place. This is Blake Jonas's vaporizer, the tall man says, placing a gold-plated device on the polished counter. Blake Jonas? Who's that? Someone asked. The tall man smiled. He was influential.
City apartments are rough. And my first two places were both basements, because that's what you can afford these days if you're looking to live alone. Third place, no lie, had a window facing a brick wall only 3 feet away. I was never looking for a spectacular view. I just wanted a decent window till last month. And I got one. I moved in on December 1st to this super small but super decent apartment, only a few minute walk from the subway. The main living space extended from the kitchen, and a flimsy sliding door separating that from a small bedroom. The east wall of the bedroom space, a floor-to-ceiling window. I mean, sure, it only overlooked the dirty street ahead. Small coffee place, huge community housing building, but my God, the air, the sounds, the sunlight, it was perfect. And it was so shockingly affordable, right? So I'll make a note here that I've never been much of a horror movie person. It never caught my interest. So when I couldn't find any bug reports on the building, I mean, it just seemed like a lucky break. Anyway, after settling my debt with my moving helpers, 6-pack of beer and a large pizza, obviously, they were off on their way, and I began putting together my home. I started with the Wi-Fi and living space, so I could work to some tunes, then unbox some stuff for the kitchen. As I was sliding some plates into my cupboard, a knock came at my door. Shit, maybe the music was too loud. Standing on the other side of the door was a small woman wearing a hijab. I smiled apologetically. Sorry, is the music too loud? No, it's fine. The walls here are good, she assured me. I wanted to say hello, welcome you to the building. Oh, I hadn't expected such a warm reception. I'd never been greeted by a neighbor in any of my previous places. Thanks so much. I'm Louis. She shook my hand. Kibla. Love to meet you. She peered into my apartment. This looks good. Do you need curtains? I can give you some. I have extra. Thanks, but I'll get around to it. I'm excited to get some December sunlight coming through, I said with a laugh. She didn't laugh. It's no problem. They're lovely curtains. And you need your privacy, she said. I chuckled, feeling some tension in the air. I'll make sure to get some cheap curtains up soon. In the meantime, I'll hide all this. I gestured to my lackluster physique.
under wraps. Again, no reaction from my neighbor. A moment later, she forced a small laugh and then nodded. "If you need anything, I'm down the hall, 1710. She nodded once more before turning away and retreating down the hall. I waved as I watched her go. Nice lady. Odd, though. Which brings us to my first night. Dark hit hard and fast, but there were a couple yellowed streetlights bathing the street and parking lot outside the closed coffee shop, and the man that was yelling. It started just as I was laying down in my bed. A senseless hollering, strings of profanity mixed with accusations at no one. But I'm not new to the city. I was near community housing, a place where folks with severe mental illness can very much end up. So, above all else, I knew to be patient. Maybe this was why the place cost so little. It'd have to be pretty extreme for that much of a price decrease. Oh, this set me on edge. After about an hour of the noise ebbing and flowing, I brought myself up and out of the bed and to the window. I looked out over the cold street and watched the snow get caught up in gusts brought to the man. He walked in his jerky circles, flailing his limbs from time to time. I touched the cold glass. At that moment, he spun around and faced me as if he could hear the barest touch. He froze. No more noise, no more circles. He just stared back up at me. He couldn't have been staring at me. I was standing in my dark room alone, 17 stories up. But from everything I could tell, he was standing in that parking lot, leaning at the slightest angle, head cocked right up at me. This wasn't good. I took a step backwards, still watching him. The moment I moved, he broke into a dead sprint. He was running directly at me. My heart leapt, but I was inside. I mean, there were many locked doors between myself and him. It was fine. That didn't stop me from running to my apartment door and triple checking that it was indeed still locked, and then watching my apartment door from my kitchen table, and then watching the street from my window to see if I could see him again. And the kitchen and the window. It wasn't a great night. The next morning, as I opened my door, it pushed against something. I full panicked for a moment, but immediately recognized it as a bundled-up window curtain with a note. For the night, they aren't people. They're cold. Signed, Kibla. It was unsettling for sure, but also, on a different note, incredibly insulting. Because she talked about the community housing folks. They were sick, not people. I let my indignant humanitarian side overpower my anxiousness over all of this and tossed the curtain inside and continued on my way. Got a donut and some bad brew at the coffee shop. Found out they only operate from 9 to 5, which isn't ideal for late-night cravings. Then I headed off to work. Night 2 was much quieter. I didn't hear a sound above the passing night traffic as I lay down to sleep. This felt much more comforting. And then it wasn't. It was too damn quiet. There were other people in the building. There was the community housing just across the street. Why was it so quiet? I stood up again and wandered to the window. Nothing to note out there. No folks wandering the streets. Only difference from the night before was one streetlight had started flickering. Maybe I was just getting in my head over all this. Then I saw the group on the balcony. 5 people stood on a balcony of the community housing building, about 5 stories higher than myself. Couldn't entirely tell if they were speaking or anything from this far, but one thing was for sure, each stood facing out. Facing me. Staring at me. I whispered some curse under my breath and immediately turned to grab the curtain near my front door. I stomped through my house, hoping the sound of my own movement would help me establish some sort of connection to reason. I was imagining things. I mean, I was getting worked up over nothing. But if the curtain would help me feel better, easy as that, let's get it up. I got back to my room just in time to see them jump. In unison, each of the 5 people on the balcony easily climbed over the rail and stepped off, still staring directly at me through the window. I dropped the curtain in terror and shouted a meaningless "Stop!" I scrambled to find my phone and dialed 911 while I made a mad dash out of my apartment and into the elevator. Police and ambulance were on the way. As the elevator rang at ground floor, I ran out of my building and into the cold. And holy shit was it cold. The biting night stung at my skin all over, seeing as I'd left wearing only my PJs and slippers. I ran across the quiet road and past the stop to the building, dreading what I was going to see. They stood there. That's all. There were the 5 figures I'd seen only moments ago, plummeting from over 20 stories, stiffly but casually looking at me with blank eyes. Nothing seemed to be wrong with them physically. I saw no signs of injury, but behind those eyes, I couldn't tell what I was seeing. I walked closer to the building, scanning the area to see if I was wrong, if it was a different group of people, but only came back to them as sirens began blaring. They walked back inside. My mind was a mess. I felt like I was going crazy as the police talked with me, but I held my composure and assured them my eyes must have been playing tricks on me that night. The sirens retreated back to the city. I slammed my fist on Kiba's door the next day. It opened only a few inches, revealing a chain lock in her eyes. "What the hell's going on?" I asked. "You didn't put up the curtain," she asked, as if it was some normal irritation. "What, is a goddamn curtain gonna stop people from jumping from fucking buildings?" I demanded. "They can see well in the dark. They noticed you. They won't hurt you, but they'll want to be close," she said, as calmly as always. "What do those people want?" "They aren't people. And they want to be warm." I sputtered, wordless. "How do you respond to that?" "Put the curtain up. It might not stop it anymore, but it'll give you peace of mind," was all she said before closing her door again. So I did. I put up the curtain and started looking for another apartment. I didn't know what was going on, but I could stay here the 2 necessary months and head out without messing up my finances too bad. My last night. The curtains drawn shut and my lights were all off, leaving me in pitch darkness, but there was no way I was getting to sleep. Past 2 days were running through my head on an endless loop. What was happening in that building? With those people, they were people, right? The quiet noise caught my attention. Barely a noise, like the sound of a mouse squeaking in the wall. Be nice to have a normal issue, like mice. Same sound, but slightly louder. I curled up in my bed. I didn't want to deal with anything tonight, but I also knew no sleep was coming if I didn't deal with whatever was causing this sound. I slumped out of my bed and listened closely, tilting my head towards the wall. Silence. Maybe I should just attempt to sleep through it. A singular clicking noise, like hail falling against glass. There was a chance I was just hearing something coming from outside, and I was fine. Or far from fine. "They won't hurt you." I shuffled towards the window. "You may want to be warm." I pulled the curtain aside. Darkness. No street lights, no snow, nothing, just the same darkness as my room. I furrowed my brow, absolutely lost. I hit the switch on my lamp. Naked bodies, stuck to the glass from the outside, awfully contorted and piled bodies, all trying to touch as much of their flesh as possible to the glass dividing us, their skin folded and flattened and still life before me, with patches of hair and scars and disease. The various faces clouded the window with their heavy breath, tongues and teeth pressed hard, almost like a suckerfish plastered and frozen in ecstasy. No, not suckerfish, more like moths. I screamed and fell back, holding down the bile, trying to shoot up. I huddled into a fetal position, rolled away from the sight before me, and I can only describe it as I lost my mind. I don't remember much until dawn came and I saw light piercing through my unmarred window. I left that day. I went to a friend's place and I stayed on their couch. My friends and a couple cousins I had here in the city, they'd gone to get my belongings. They all think I just had some kind of random psychological meltdown. It took me this long to get to the point where I can even consider leaving this house and go back to work. I'm gonna live with friends for a while, and if I do someday get a place again, I am so fine with basements. Hey there kids, it's me, Mr. Creepypasta, and before we get started on tonight's video, I'm gonna let you know that tonight's author, the Idiot Boss, currently has a YouTube channel as Thrill List Official, if you'd like. It's going to be linked in the description down below, it's going to be on that little eye up in the top corner, and it's also going to be linked at the very end of this video. If you'd like to hear tonight's author read some more of his stories in some longer fiction, some shorter fiction, and the like, then I strongly suggest you check out his channel directly. And now, on to tonight's video. I didn't notice either. I only realized last month. 13 months ago, I was watching the New Year's Eve fireworks on TV, and I went to bed to get up to work the next day. Everything was normal. The only reason I know the world ended was, well, last month, my private health insurance was canceled. I checked my policy online to find that I had been declared deceased. There was an attached certificate, full name, date of birth, time of death being January 1st, 2025, 12:03. 3 minutes into the year. I called the provider, where the woman sounded polite and baffled. This record is from the Central Registry, she said. We can't override it. I explained that the record must have been incorrect because I was on the phone talking to her. There was a hesitation before she replied. This record was finalized during the January migration. Migration? What migration? I asked. There was a pause of silence, then she replied, "Everyone knows about that." And then she hung up. Once I started digging, more things didn't seem right. My bank statement listed transactions I'd never heard of. Not illegal ones, just everyday things that I probably would have been doing at that time. When I inquired about the transactions, people seemed to think that I was having a joke. "You went there," one person said. "You complained about the seating arrangements." Since January of 2025, the world seemed strange. Each week brought news of a new trade war or conflict, which then rapidly reached its conclusion to be replaced by another, or the initiation of a peace process that was ultimately abandoned. The language and participants changed, the outcomes never did, and nothing ever really progressed or collapsed.
It was like time got stuck at a junction where consequences were promised, but never delivered. I mentioned to a colleague that I felt like history wasn't moving forward. Yeah, he said with a laugh. Since the migration. I asked him what he meant. And he just blinked and claimed that he didn't even remember saying it. The first moment I felt scared was on the train. The woman sitting opposite me glanced up from her phone. David, she said, without even raising her voice. I asked her if she knew me, and she replied almost apologetically, Sorry, that was reconciled earlier. Reconciled? I asked. She shrugged. Don't know. And went back to looking at her phone. From then on, I kept hearing the word reconciled. Doctors, customer service assistants, and once a stranger I'd asked for directions who still got me lost. The question of January the 1st, or the January migration, or why a public record claimed I was dead always provoked the same response. Over the last week, I've spent time in the archives of the old university library. This morning, I found the document by accident in a public directory on their servers. Post-transition, population, integrity report. The first sections were full of technical jargon, but the final pages contained nothing but tables with billions of entries, and the status of each of them recorded as stable, integrated, or incomplete. When I searched for my name, notes were listed against my entry. Subject exhibits drift. Record divergence exceeds acceptable levels. Passive resolution recommended. Residual instance may be temporary if original instance is no longer available. I closed the document in a state of bewilderment, and then my phone pinged. An automated email appeared with the heading Personal Data Reconciliation Notice. It stated that I had irregularities being corrected within the next hour. I left the library immediately. The city looked normal on the surface, carrying with the traffic, lights, and people, but I realized everyone was staring without seeing. People were walking, turning perfectly without ever really looking. I started walking, and then I broke into a run. Street after street looking the same. The coffee shop that I'd entered earlier reappeared as I walked. The clock on my phone displayed 3 a.m. and stopped. Suddenly, the sounds of the city died out as people slowed to a halt mid-stride. I couldn't move my fingers at first. They started, but then there was a slight lag, but then I couldn't get my left arm to respond, and when I tried to speak, only part of it came out. I could feel everything. I just couldn't make it happen. My phone vibrated again with no sender and no title. Your personal record cannot be reconciled with the environment. The original instance is no longer available. Thank you for your contribution to continuity. It wasn't only me that died on the 1st of January 2025. No one ever truly moved into January of 2025. Everyone's a copy that works just well enough that they believe that they're alive. I just wasn't copied correctly. And I'm still here in this new world left over as evidence that something failed. So if any of you feel that the last 13 months felt wrong in some subtle way, and if you've noticed something but never found out exactly why, I'd advise you to stop trying to explain it. The world you're standing in is a copy. And it's trying to remove all witnesses. When I was 8 years old, my parents and I moved into a quiet neighborhood on the edge of a town I'd never heard of before. The houses were identical in a way that made it hard to tell which ones were ours at first. Same pale siding, same
Trimmed hedges, same mailbox posts, painted the same dull green. Even the sidewalks looked freshly scrubbed, like someone was afraid of leaving fingerprints on the place. The HOA president came by that afternoon. He introduced himself with a handshake that lingered too long and a plastic container balanced in the crook of his arm. Inside was a cake that had been frosted to look fancy, but when my mom cut into it later, it tasted bland and artificial. Sweet in the wrong way, like flavoring instead of food. The kind of thing that leaves your mouth dry afterward. He also handed my parents a packet of papers and stood on the porch while they skimmed through it. I remember most of it being boring. Rules about lawns, trash bins, noise complaints, outdoor decorations, how long cars could be parked on the street, normal HOA stuff. I was personally more interested in the ants crawling near the steps. Then, my dad stopped flipping pages. I remember him rereading one line silently, his eyebrows pulled together. When I asked what it was, the HOA president laughed a little too fast and said it was just an old neighborhood joke, nothing serious. My mom took the papers away. Later that night, I snuck the packet off the kitchen counter and read the part I'd seen my dad pause on. It was printed in the same font as everything else, same size, same spacing, no bold letters or warnings. Don't let the midnight salesman in. That was it. No explanation, no context, just sitting between a rule about patio furniture and another about window blinds. I didn't sleep much that night. At exactly 12, there were 3 knocks on our front door. Not loud, not soft, perfectly even, like someone tapping on a desk. My parents froze. My mom stood up and relocked the door despite it already being locked. Then the voice came through the wood. "Mr. and Mrs. Grayson, would you be interested in this product I'm selling? I must say, it's an offer I can't refuse." His voice was calm and practiced, the way customer service workers talk when they're reading from a script. He didn't raise it, he didn't sound angry, he sounded patient. No one answered. He stood there for exactly 5 minutes. I counted on the microwave clock in the kitchen. He kept talking the entire time, changing the wording slightly each night. Sometimes he said it was a limited opportunity. Sometimes he said it was essential. Sometimes he said it was a solution. But it always started with our names, always polite, always certain. When the 5 minutes were over, he stopped mid-sentence and left. There were never footsteps, just silence where he had been. This happened every night. Eventually, it became routine. Lights off by 11, curtains shut, TV muted. My parents whispered instead of talking. Sometimes I peek through the blinds and see porch lights turn off down the street one by one, like the neighborhood was holding its breath together. One night I asked, "Why don't we just tell him to go away?" My mom didn't answer at first. She kept her eyes on the dark window, watching our reflection instead of the street outside. "Because we don't talk to him. That's the rule. But he's just standing there. He's not doing anything weird." My dad turned the volume on the TV down another notch, even though it was already barely audible. "You don't know that, and neither do we, so for now, just do what you're told." "He knows our names," I whispered. "How does he know our names?" Neither of them responded. My mom reached over and squeezed my knee too hard, like she was trying to physically keep me still. "You don't open that door," my dad said. His voice wasn't angry, it was tight. It was controlled. "You don't answer him. You don't look at him. You don't think of him. You stay away from the front of the house after midnight. Do you understand me? I nodded, even though I didn't really understand anything except that they were scared. After a few weeks, the fear turned into something else. Curiosity. Frustration. I was tired of hiding, tired of being quiet in my own house. So one night, before my mom could grab my arm, I walked to the door and unlocked it. The salesman was standing just outside the reach of the porch light. He looked normal. Too normal. Clean clothes, neatly combed hair, empty hands, no bag, no clipboard, nothing to prove he was selling anything at all. Before I could say a word, my dad rushed forward, shoved me backwards into the hallway, hard enough that I fell. The salesman didn't even glance at me. His eyes locked onto my father instead, and his smile widened just slightly. He said my dad's name like he'd known it for years. I don't know what was said outside. The door closed behind them, and the wind started immediately, rushing through the trees so hard the windows rattled. The pressure in my ears made everything feel underwater. It only lasted a few seconds. When my dad came back inside, he was carrying an expensive towel warmer. He held it against his chest like it mattered, like it was important. He walked past us without speaking and sat down on the couch. Dad? He didn't look at me. My mom stepped in front of him and crouched down so her face was level with his. Hey, talk to me, honey. What did he say to you? No response. She touched his arm and gave it a small shake. You're scaring me, Hen. Say something. Anything. He blinked, slowly, but didn't react. His eyes stayed open, unfocused, like he was staring through the wall instead of at it. I moved closer and waved my hand in front of his face. Dad, please stop. This isn't funny. My mom grabbed his shoulder and shook him harder now. Look at me, Henry. Look at me. His head moved with her hands, but his eyes didn't follow. I remember my mom's voice breaking when she said his name again and again, getting louder each time, like volume alone might pull him back. Call 911, she said suddenly, not looking away from him. I froze because I was overwhelmed. Damn it, right now! I ran to the kitchen phone with my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Behind me, my dad sat perfectly still on the couch, holding the towel warmer like it was the last thing he had been told to keep. We tried talking to him, shaking his shoulders, calling his name. He blinked slowly but didn't react. His eyes stayed open, unfocused, like he was staring through the wall instead of at it. At the hospital, the doctors told us there was no physical damage, no stroke, no trauma, no tumors. His brain scans were clean. One of the neurologists spoke to my mom in a quiet consultation room while I sat on the paper-covered exam table, swinging my legs. I tried not to listen, and even though I couldn't understand any of it, it still stuck with me. Structurally, his brain looks normal. There's no sign of hemorrhage, ischemia, swelling, or mass effect. His MRI and CT are also unremarkable. My mom gripped the edge of the chair as she cried, Then why won't he do anything? Well, we're seeing electrical activity on the EEG. Basic cortical function is present, reflexes are intact. Pupillary response is normal, but he isn't producing any form of purposeful movement or speech. So he's in a coma. The doctor shook her head. Not exactly. He's awake. His eyes are open. Sleep-wake cycles are present. What's missing is meaningful interaction with the environment. She paused, choosing her words carefully. It suggests a severe disruption in the networks that connect sensory processing to motor response. In layman's terms, His brain is receiving all the information it needs, but it isn't translating that input into anything beyond autonomous actions. Can it heal? Can he be fixed? My mom asked. There's no visible injury to recover from, the doctor said quietly. That's what makes this difficult. We can't point to a damaged area, and therefore we can't do anything. Right now, we'd have to classify this as a disorder of consciousness with no identifiable structural cause. I remember her adding one last thing before she left the room. It's extremely rare to see this in patients without trauma, which means we don't have a clear explanation. I'm sorry, but there's nothing we can do for him. He never came back. Not really. He still sat in the living room sometimes, still somehow ate if food was put in front of him, still breathed, but nothing inside of him mattered anymore. It was like the salesman had taken whatever part of him made him him. He stayed in that house even after I left. I left for college when I was 18. Moving out felt less like freedom, more like escaping a house that had already gone quiet. I went to a state school a few hours away and studied something practical because I didn't know what else to choose. I avoided talking about my dad. When people asked why I never went home for holidays, I said there'd been a medical emergency, and I left it at that. I started seeing a therapist during my second year because I kept waking up at midnight for no clear reason. We talked about trauma and anxiety, how kids can internalize things and blame themselves for what they had no control over. I never mentioned the salesman. Some things felt safer staying unnamed. My mom kept my dad in assisted care while I was gone. I helped pay when I could. There were specialists, rehabilitation programs, quiet hospital rooms that all blended together after a while. When I visited, I talked anyway, about classes, about dumb campus problems, about the weather. He never answered. Sometimes I think his eyes followed me when I stood up to leave, but the nurses said it was involuntary, and eventually I stopped asking. I met my wife during my last year of college. We started studying together and slowly built something normal. First, I told her my family situation was complicated. Later, I told her about my dad, about the silence, about the house. She didn't push for details I wasn't ready to give. When we got married, talked about where to live, I told her anywhere that wasn't my childhood neighborhood. She agreed without hesitation. Meanwhile, my mom couldn't afford to move. I think she was also afraid to leave. The knocking never came again after that night, but the rule was still there, sitting in the HOA packet in the drawer, untouched. Waiting. Yesterday, my mother passed away. I spent the day signing papers, making phone calls, packing hospital belongings into plastic bags. When I came home, the house felt bigger than it ever had before. Too quiet, no monitors, no murmured conversations, just empty rooms and furniture that suddenly belonged to no one. The house is in my name now. While going through those filing cabinets, I found the old HOA packet. The pages were yellow, the rules were still there, exactly the same. Don't let the midnight salesman in. It's almost 11:30. My wife is the smartest, most put-together human being I've ever had the pleasure of knowing. It baffles me how such an angel as her could settle for a mess like me. Not only did she agree to put up with me for the rest of her life, but she also decided that we should have a child. This amazing person who fucking killed it in university and ran her own business that was successful enough to keep more than 24 people comfortable, wanted to procreate with a cunt who barely even finished his GCSEs. It made no sense. But the thing about Sarah is that she's a stubborn bitch, right? So when she's made her mind up about something, it's very hard to talk her out of it. Not that I tried very hard to do so. Hey, while I was busy shitting enough bricks to build a house too big for us to afford, she planned out every single thing down to the most minute details. Her diet, how she'd exercise, how the birth would go down, what the kid's bloody room would look like. All was decided before the test even came back positive. It was like emasculating, to be frank, but my only job was to bring my dick along, and I'm sure I almost fucked that up too. She was kind enough to let me take care of her the best of my ability during the pregnancy. With all her planning, she'd forgotten to take into account the human person that she'd have growing in her belly during all that time, and the difficulties that come with that. It truly was one of the most terrifying things I've ever experienced. I mean, I feel like that anticipation built over the months until I could barely breathe. Sarah did her best to soothe me, but it felt silly to go whining to her about being nervous. She was the one doing the hard work. But when Alfie was born, all those nerves blinked away. Jumbled puzzle pieces of the world suddenly clicked together to finally form a picture that I'd been looking for. Before becoming a father, it was like I'd been standing in one of those hall of mirrors, right? Unable to figure out which way was forward, having to rely on Sarah's hand to guide me. But when I held him in my arms, for the first time, I was suddenly on a straight open path. The purpose I'd never been able to find for my entire life was suddenly right in front of me. And that feeling even survived him, immediately releasing more shit from his ass than I think I'd ever seen before, all down the front of my clothes. Clothes I then had to go home wearing. I'm not going to pretend I was some kind of natural, right? Fucking things up is my number one talent, and I was still doing plenty of it. I was permanently exhausted, but I grew up spending entire weeks sleepless while grinding for rare gear in various video games, so I was trained to resist the weight of fatigue. But I turned out to be pretty damn good at being a dad. I can't take all the credit. I mean, Sarah made sure that I'd studied a countless number of books on the subject back to front, but sitting with my son, I'd think back to all those times other parents had warned me. You know, they told me I'd resent the lack of sleep, that I'd be miserable for at least the first few months, if not years. But none of that turned out to be true. I mean, I was unbothered by all that shit. I had my son. Nothing else mattered. My wife, she had a harder time. She learned quickly that being a mother isn't like running a company, that the primary directive of all children is to shatter every plan their parents concocted, right? With all her research and preparations with the physical side, I don't think she ever guessed the kind of toll giving birth would take on her mental health. Some days she couldn't even get herself out of bed, feeling tired all the time. She couldn't work. I mean, I love Sarah, but if there's one thing she's terrible at, it's sitting still. So while trying to recover from having her insides ripped out, she was beating herself up for resting instead of single-handedly holding up the sky. I often found myself holding her, telling her that she was a good mom, reminding her how badass she was, while she felt like she was failing. It broke my heart to see my smart, confident wife crumble apart like that. It felt so fucking useless, not knowing the right words to say, though As it shamed me to admit it, it felt good to be the one comforting her for once, even if I was shit at it, right? My mother suggested that maybe Sarah was suffering from some kind of postpartum depression. She explained what it was, telling me about how she'd gone through something similar after I was born. I managed to convince my wife to start seeing a shrink, which helped. She still had her moments, but the color was returning to her, and she was able to get out of bed more, even leave the house, right? So one day, when Alfie was about a month and a half old, she came home from a day out with him looking on the verge of a breakdown. And I asked what was wrong. She practically collapsed into my arms. "I almost lost him," she whimpered to me. After calming her down and putting Alfie to bed, I got the full story from her. She took her eyes off him. It was a tiny, insignificant amount of time that turned out to be a travesty. She stepped away for maybe a minute to quickly grab something, and when she returned, he was gone. A frantic few minutes proceeded where she searched desperately, eventually finding him still in his pram not too far away. I soothed her as she cried, telling her that one mistake didn't mean she'd failed as a mother, but part of me thinks she never forgave herself for it. The story didn't quite sit right with me, with the pram rolling off all by itself, but I didn't want to interrogate her too much. My son was fine. That's what mattered. I just assumed the wheels on the pram hadn't locked properly or something, and maybe the wind blew or something bumped it. Now I know the truth. That was when it happened. That was the moment my life began to fall apart. Sarah started watching Alfie much more closely after that, a mother's guilt weighing heavy on her shoulders. She'd go running to him at any and every sound he made. I'd find her hovering above his crib, sometimes late into the night, watching him sleep. I noticed Alfie crying a lot more than he used to. He was never quiet by any means, but now it was almost constant. Sarah explained it to be hunger, that he was just growing. But I swear, some days she was feeding him every half hour. One day when I'd managed to convince Sarah to get some rest, I sat with Alfie in my arms, rocking him slowly, listening to his breathing. It was much deeper than before, much more strained, like the air scratched the inside of his throat on each exhale. I watched his chest move up and down with each labored breath, wondering just how a baby could eat so much and still look so skinny. The first visit to the doctor came when I walked into the baby's room to find Sarah propped up against the crib, half unconscious with blood leaking from her nipples. The mental image of Alfie laying asleep with crimson-stained lips still makes me shiver. The doctor couldn't find anything wrong with Alfie, giving us a few half-assed guesses, such as colic, suggesting we start using bottles if the feeding's too hard on Sarah's breasts. An air of judgment dripped from his words like venom. Sarah burst into tears on the drive home. We started feeding Alfie through bottles, something he took to without any difficulty, which I thank God for. Things seemed to be getting a little easier for a while, though we ended up needing to buy baby formula alongside the breast milk because he was eating it all. I did the math once. Alfie was eating something over 10 times what a baby was meant to eat. We were spending hundreds of pounds on anything the little man would let down his throat, but he never seemed to gain weight. His skin still taut on the ridges of his ribs. After returning home with bags filled mostly with baby formula, completely forgetting at this point to get anything for me and Sarah to eat, I found Sarah sat in the middle of the living room holding Alfie to her chest and crying. "I think he's sick," she managed to get out between sobs. Alfie's skin had turned a jaundiced yellow. It felt rubbery, slick. When I finally managed to pry his eyes open, I found the same for them, the sclera now a murky, bloodshot brown. We took him back to the hospital where we sat, unable to even breathe as the doctors ran test after test after test after test after test. Enduring side eyes, whispered expressions of disgust. But they again didn't find anything. Nothing that could cause any of the symptoms. Even after monitoring him over several nights, the useless bastards couldn't find anything. Eventually, we just had to take him home. What the hell else were we supposed to do? Spend our entire lives in the hospital? Other than the yellow skin and the eating habits, there didn't seem to be anything else wrong. He wasn't in pain. He looked malnourished, but I could tell just by the void in my pocket that he was far from that. I just felt so fucking useless. Time was blending together at this point, whether due to the lack of sleep or the identical days. So I'm not exactly sure how many weeks it'd been since me and my wife had slept in the same bed, but I think Alfie was about 4 months old. We were on a schedule of shifts. One of us would sit with Alfie, feeding him over and over, while the other person stole a few hours of darkness. One time I had run out of bottles, but didn't want to wake Sarah. She was coming apart at the seams. We both were. It was agony to see her like that. This woman I thought could take on the whole world, now with frazzled, unkempt hair, sagging skin, permanently rheumy eyes. We hadn't even washed our clothes in weeks. I don't think she had a single shirt that didn't have blood stains on the chest. I wanted Sarah to have at least one full night's sleep, so I let Alfie suckle on the tip of my finger, hoping that it'd delay the mind-breaking wailing by just a few more minutes. And it worked. The silence was so blissful I began to nod off myself. But just as my eyelids made my vision flicker, a sharp pain shot through my hand and woke me right back up. I yelped, yanked my hand from Alfie's mouth, almost throwing him off me on instinct. Immediately he began screaming, the sound cutting into my eardrums with a similar pain to what I just felt in my hand, but I was unbothered, my attention absorbed entirely by the bead of blood trickling down from the tip of my index finger. Sarah and I had basically stopped speaking to each other unless it was about Alfie. No more giggle-filled conversations about the most ridiculous things, no more romantic dinners and inside jokes, no more intimacy, emotional or physical. No more love. Just two zombies funneling milk into a screaming infant, like insects whose sole reason for existence was to feed their queen. I stopped on the doorstep after a shopping trip once, my forehead pressing against the door as I listened to Alfie's screams pierce through the walls like bullets from a machine gun. I could hear it throughout the entire street as I walked. I heard comments and complaints from just about every person who lived anywhere near us. I'm ashamed of it, but I thought about turning around, walking back to the shop, to a pub, anywhere. I wanted to not hear it for a while. It was strange. It'd been just 5 months, almost nothing in the grand scheme of things, yet it felt like looking after Alfie was all I'd ever done. I could barely remember life before. I struggled to recall the names of friends I'd celebrated with when he was born. I knew going into it that having a kid was supposed to change your life, but I'd been utterly consumed by it. I tried to smother those disgusting thoughts, but they didn't relent until I heard Sarah inside. "Shut the fuck up!" along with glass shattering and a thud. With my heart trying to burst out of my chest, I dropped the shopping at the door, and I rushed inside. I heard another smash before I reached the room. Finding glass and ceramics strewn across the floor, Alfie was on the kitchen table, screaming so hard his yellow face was turning shades of purple. "Shut up! Shut up!" Sarah kept shouting as she picked up another plate to throw. Her pale face was covered in tears and snot, and her neck and arms bearing scratches that oozed blood. I grabbed her and yanked her back, asking what the fuck she was doing. "I can't do it. He won't stop. He won't stop. I can't. I hate him." She gasped when she realized what she had said, dread tightening around her pupils before she burst back into tears. I sat her down in the living room before returning to Alfie, doing everything I could to get him to finish the 2 bottles Sarah had been trying to give him. It took me almost an hour to finally get him to quiet down. I put him to bed and quickly rushed back to my wife, hoping we could talk in the 5 minutes of quiet it bought us. Sarah sat on the sofa, rocking back and forth as she cried, her hands balled at her ears with clumps of hair that she'd ripped out. I crouched down in front of her, placing my hands on her bouncing knees. "Can you look at me?" I asked. She shook her head rapidly. "Can't do it, Jack. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to fix it. I wanted to hurt him." But she didn't. I cut her off. "He's fine." I caught myself because fine was the last word I'd used to describe any of this. "He's not hurt." I didn't know what else to say. Sarah was the capable one. Sarah was the one with the answers. What the fuck could I do? Eventually, I found the words. I suggested that maybe we needed some time to ourselves. I could call my mom, ask her to watch Alfie for a bit, and we could go out together, or stay in, or do anything we wanted. Feel like people again. She shook her head and tearfully argued that it wouldn't be right to dump Alfie on anyone, especially my arthritic mother, who would have had to drive down from Scotland. Because that's Sarah. A stubborn bitch. She'd rather die than let someone else carry her problems for her. Trying to think of something else, I realized that in all the stress of looking for Alfie, she stopped seeing her therapist. So, I suggested that she start going again, and she sobbed harder, murmuring to herself about being a terrible mother. I held her until Alfie started crying again. A few days that melded together later, and Sarah had a meeting with her shrink. I encouraged it, but also dreaded having to be alone with my infant son. His screams bursting through my eardrums as I mixed formula until my fingers ached, but much to my surprise, a little bit after Sarah left, Alfie was quiet. It took me some time to realize, my fatigued body in autopilot, but at some point it hit me that the screaming I was hearing was just the echoes in my head, and Alfie was laying in his crib, perfectly tranquil. It terrified me at first. I thought he was sick or hurt, but when I picked him up, he was fine. I sat in my living room, rocking him in my arms. I watched the television like I used to just after he was born, like I used to before that day Sarah took him out. And though he was still bony and yellow and fussed for feeding every half hour, he wasn't screaming. It racked my mind wondering what I did to calm him down, but the only difference I could find was Sarah's absence. My heart felt heavy at the prospect of telling her. I thought she'd read into it in a bad way. It had to be coincidence, but there was no way that she'd think that. My fears were in vain, though. When she returned home, she seemed okay, quiet, maybe a little cold. I chalked it up as the come-down from an emotional conversation, but when she looked at Alfie in my arms, there was something in her eye that almost made me wince. I don't really know how to put it into words. Not hate, not apathy, just suspicion. She seemed withdrawn for the rest of the day, not going anywhere near Alfie. Again, I just assumed maybe whatever she'd discussed with the shrink had left her emotionally drained. I considered asking her about it, but figured that wasn't the kind of thing that should be shared, even with me. I decided just to give her space and time to figure herself out. What I would give to go back and change that decision. Maybe we could have worked it out together. Maybe I could have helped her. She watched me feed Alfie and put him to bed. And when I pushed through my worry and expressed amazement at how he was still quiet, she just shrugged. She volunteered to watch over him that night to make up for leaving me alone and encouraged me to get some sleep. I suggested that maybe she should come to bed too, that maybe whatever it was that was wrong is now over. Maybe it was just colic. That he's quiet now, and we'd be able to get some real rest. I was halfway begging. I just wanted to share a bed with my wife again. She shook her head, her dispassionate eyes analyzing our son's skinny yellow body as his prominent ribcage slowly rose and fell. Her arms crossed tight over her chest, her face struggling to keep the sneer suppressed. Apprehensively, I relented, recognizing the look of stoic resignation that she'd put on when making a tough decision, and knowing that look meant she'd made her choice. Sarah was always a stubborn bitch. When she made up her mind about something, it was impossible to talk her out of it. So I went to bed. But even with now months' worth of sleep that I'd accumulated, sleep was distant. I had this terrible sensation churning in my gut and an alien buzzing in my brain. An intuition. Even now, I don't think I could say for certain what it was, some nebulous sensation, but it made the echoes of Alfie's cries in my head become deafening. I listened as Sarah went downstairs, a heaviness in her steps. I listened to the banging as she rooted around the piled-up dishes and bottles in the kitchen. I listened as she marched back upstairs, each thump making my breath hitch. Horrible stir roiling in my stomach like rocks in a washing machine. Eventually, the arcane feeling of my skull wanting to cave in became unbearable. I got up and with the slow, soft steps crossed the hall back to Alfie's room. I peeked back inside to see Sarah hovering over the crib like she would just after she had lost him on that day. My lips fought against my unease, trying to smile, thinking she was just wary of why Alfie was suddenly quiet. But then I noticed the knife in her hand. I stepped inside and quietly called her name. Sarah? She brought the knife up, and before my mind had time to truly process what I was seeing, I darted across the room. The blade came down on the edge of the crib as I yanked her backwards. Sarah, what the fuck? Alfie began screaming, as did Sarah. Get off me! Her arms flailing wildly, her elbow catching me on the chin. One hand with a death grip on the crib, the other thrashing out at my son with a knife. Sarah fought me. It's not him, Jack! Get away! Let go! Her yells were drowned out by my son's terrified wailing. We'd pulled the crib halfway across the room at this point, and Sarah would not let go, her legs kicking out and whacking against the crib, each flash of the blade making my heart jump. Wrapping one arm fully around her waist, I freed her hand and used it to pry her grip from the crib, digging my nails into the flesh of her wrist, making her cry out. When she finally let go, I swung her around and threw her out the door. She thrashed her knife as she fell into the hallway, slashing me across the forearm, making me stumble backwards. I looked back and met her terrified eyes. She looked at the blood pouring in rivulets down my arm, then the scarlet-stained knife in her hand. Jack, please, she begged between heavy pants. Please believe me, that's not Alfie. That thing is not our son. I kept my hands raised in front of me, non-threateningly. Alfie's screams dampening into quiet mewls. Please put the knife down. We can call the therapist. And we can talk about this, okay? It's gonna be all right. I promise. This was a promise I couldn't fulfill. Sarah shook her head, a deluge of tears pooling in her eyes, her jaw tight as the knife shook in her hand. It's not him, Jack, she whimpered, her eyes suddenly bulging open as she pointed with the knife, making me flinch. Look! Look what he's doing! She cried out. I cut my gaze to Alfie as he rolled onto his side, writhing in the crib, as helpless as I felt, letting out a couple cries, presumably upset by his mother's shouting. Controlling my breathing, I took a step towards Sarah, keeping myself between her and Alfie. "Put the knife down," I pleaded. "That's not Alfie!" she shouted again. Growing frantic, the woman I love, now a rabid animal. "That's not my son!" My eyes kept darting to the door, which she must have noticed, suddenly becoming quiet, her face sharpening with determination. After a moment that felt like an eternity, I dashed forward. Sarah moved to block me, but I punched her in the face, sending her sprawling out into the hallway again, stunning her long enough to slam the door shut. I had just enough time to pull a wardrobe over to block the door before Sarah slammed herself against it, her mournful wail shattering something deep inside of me. She hammered against the door, the metallic thuds as she slammed the knife against the wood. "Jack, no, please, it's not Alfie, please listen. It's a monster, it took him. Jack, please let me in, I can show you." I grabbed my phone and called the police, my voice shaking as I described a scene I didn't want to believe was really happening. The time I sat there with my son, Sarah begged me to open the door, begged me to realize that thing in the crib was not my son. It felt like an eternity. When I assumed be repeated for me endlessly when I reached hell. I cried my fucking eyes out when I heard them kick in the door and drag her away. People told me all kinds of reasons and excuses, mental breakdown, psychosis. I didn't care about the why or the how. The pain that comes from fighting the belief that the woman you loved for the most of your life is actually a monster is something words can't define or assuage. My wife was gone. Now all I had was my son. Nothing else mattered. After trying to explain to the police the same things she told me, Sarah was put in a psychiatric facility. I tried to visit her a few times, but all she'd do was scream at me, pleading to find Alfie and kill the thing that stole his place. Eventually, it became too painful to see her, so I stopped going. I abandoned her in there. I betrayed my vows by abandoning the person who showed me what it's like to live. Alfie stopped crying almost completely after that. He'd whine when he wanted feeding every 30 minutes, but other than that, he was quiet. Made me wonder if Sarah had been doing something to him to make him the way that he was. Maybe she'd been hurting him or poisoning him. I read up on Munchausen syndrome by proxy, read up on postpartum psychosis, just about every other disorder I could find. Not a day went by where I didn't break down sobbing. I wanted to give up, wanted to fade into the cloud of darkness that had encompassed my life. Like a stone sinking into the sea, but I couldn't. So I put the pain into caring for my son, into finding the strength to do all the things that had once been shared between the two of us. I switched off all those parts of myself that Sarah had once nurtured until the only thing I had the capacity to feel was a father's love. My mom was insistent she'd come down to London to help me, but I fought her off. Every time she offered it, I'd become almost nauseous at the prospect, like my body was repulsed by the idea of not doing this alone, at the possibility of what happened to Sarah happening again somehow. I think the only reason I still answered her daily calls was because if I didn't, she would want to appear at my doorstep unbidden. I can't recall how much time passed between Sarah's meltdown and the day I collapsed. I must have been months, might have been years. Time for me is a melange of hazy splotches. I remember just before I collapsed, I put Alfie in his high chair in the kitchen, and I stepped into the living room for something. And I remember waking up on the floor. My cheek prickled against the crusty carpet, sticky blood growing cold on my face. I struggled to find my senses, my body fighting off consciousness to reclaim some of my deteriorating mind. "Are you dead already?" chuckled a breathless voice so gravelly the speaker sounded in pain. When my eyelids finally found the strength to flutter open, my hazy gaze was absorbed by a tall, thin figure hovering over me, watching me. I writhed and groaned, my limbs refusing to listen to my brain's signals. I managed to lift my arms and roll onto my stomach as a deep laugh filled the air like chlorine gas, making my blood icy in my veins. I smelled blood and feces, and I could taste dirt. Blinking moisture into my eyes and clearing my throat, the dream vision disappeared with a pitter-patter in the kitchen, and when I lifted my head, I was alone. Great. I'm psycho now, too. I pulled myself up and sat against the sofa, my bones throbbing as I watched my hands tremble. My head was bleeding. Suppose I'd hit it when I fell. At the time, I assumed it was exhaustion and the stress getting the better of me. I needed help. I warred with myself, practically begged myself to call my mom and ask her to save me like she always would. The thought of her face made me want to vomit. I knew I should go to the doctor, but again, the idea fought me. The prospect of describing my situation to anyone made me angrier than I'd ever been before, strings of violence tugging at my mind. Thinking back to when we'd taken Alfie to the hospital made me hate my wife even more than I'd grown to. I cried, feeling almost completely alone with only my son. I finally found the strength to stagger upstairs, finding Alfie in his crib. When he saw me, he giggled and reached up a thin yellow hand to me. I looked down upon his frail skeletal frame, his rubbery, jaundiced skin, bloodshot yellow eyes with black irises, and for a moment, I was disgusted by the creature before me. But it was only for a moment. Alfie giggled and wiggled his arms again, and love filled my chest like an aggressive cancer. I picked him up and I cradled him, tears burning my cheeks as I laughed with him. He pawed at me and murmured the way he does when he's hungry. I carried him downstairs and let him watch me prepare the bottle of milk, sat with him in the living room and let him ravenously devour every drop in the bottle, almost pulling it from my fingers several times. My breath caught in my throat, the warmth of adoration wrapping around me like python coiling around a rat. When I pulled the rubber nipple from his mouth, there was a crimson smear left on it. I looked down at the blood stain in the carpet, realizing it was the same color. My heart sank into the ground. I tossed the bottle immediately and began examining him, running my finger along with the inside of his lips. Alfie stopped fussing instantly. In fact, he went deathly still. His eyes narrow with this calculation that seemed strange on the face of a baby. Even when I poked and prodded his gums, he didn't fidget. He just watched me. I hissed when a sharp pain cut into my finger. I pulled it from his mouth and watched blood bead on the tip. With my pinky, I folded his lips back and looked closely at the dark purplish gums in my baby's mouth. It felt like a winter wind washed over my shoulders as I stared down at the tiny needle-like points poking out. I blinked several times, wondering if maybe I'd hit my head harder than I thought. Maybe I was still dreaming, but It's when I noticed how he was looking at me that the world went silent. His face was cold, stony. His eyes were filled with contempt, an expression an infant was not meant to display. "All right, mate, let's get you back in bed," I said, with forced cheer and a chuckle that I had to squeeze out of my diaphragm. I don't think he bought it. His icy stare remaining fixed on me until I closed the door to his room behind me. My heart was racing so fast I was worried I'd cough it up. My mind was a cacophony of noise, but there was one thing I couldn't stop thinking. Sarah's words. That's not Alfie. I closed myself in my bedroom in a panic. Couldn't be real. It must have been having a breakdown like Sarah did. It's a monster. That was my son. My fucking blood, my flesh, part of me. He was just teething. That had to be it. Wasn't he about that age? I couldn't remember. Why couldn't I remember how old my son was? I couldn't remember anything. I couldn't remember my friends' names. I couldn't remember my mother's address. I couldn't even remember where I'd bought the formula I'd been feeding him. Feeding it. No, this was insane. I was sleep deprived. Stressed from having my wife try to kill me and my son. I was having some kind of mental health crisis. I needed to finally get some help. I searched around for my phone and eventually, leaving my room to search the house under every pillow, and found it in the toilet. The screen smashed. Dead and unusable. I never brought my phone into the bathroom. Moving back upstairs, I peeked into Alfie's room. He was sat upright in his crib, watching me plainly, curiously. He never sat up before that. And I had a nasty realization settle in my gut. It knew. It knew that I knew. Like Sarah knew. I closed myself in my bedroom again and blocked the door, remaining hidden away until the sun rose the next day. Alfie started crying at some point, but after a while he realized I wasn't coming and stopped, remaining silent for the rest of the night. After a shit ton of Googling, I concocted a plan that I was sure certified me as a nutcase because I had to be certain. Before I did anything, I needed to be 100% fucking certain. And when daylight turned the outside world into a blinding wasteland, reminding me of just how alone I was, I left the room to gather what I needed. As I put the things together, I felt stupid. Everything in me screaming that this was ridiculous. Alfie was my son. I was having a crisis, and I needed to stop. But there was something deep inside me that knew I had to do this. Once I had everything together, I made my way back to Alfie's room. He was laying in his crib, his skeletal chest pulsing with shallow breaths. I drifted through the room, very hesitantly turning my back on him as I laid everything out on the changing table. Then I began. I opened the carton and plucked up the first egg, cracking the shell on the side of the pot before dumping the content onto the floor beside my feet. Then I placed the shells into the pot and began to stir. I did it again and again. On the third egg, Alfie laughed, making me freeze while I listened to the creaking of the crib as he moved. I repeated the absurd action until the contents of nearly a dozen eggs covered the floor, my socks soaked with yolk. I then placed the empty carton on my head and took the pot in both hands and began tossing the eggshells like you would an omelet. Alfie laughed again, and then it happened. "Why are you doing that?" A strained, harsh, gravelly voice cut through the silence like a lightning bolt. My eyes burned and vision blurred as tears threatened to drown me. Sarah was right. She was right. And I didn't fucking listen. My entire body trembling with fear, I placed the pot filled with eggshells onto the changing table. I didn't look at it, I just, as calmly as I could manage, walked out of the room and into my bedroom, piling half the furniture in front of the door to give me the time to type this up. Alfie's been crying louder than he ever had before. The noise like sandpaper raking my brain, but now he's suddenly stopped. I'm not sure if I'm losing it, but I'm certain I just heard the door handle jostle. There's an occasional creak now in the wall, on the stairs, the floorboards, as if it's moving around the house, trying to be quiet, waiting for me to come out. I'm not sure exactly why I'm writing this. I mean, maybe someone could use this to see the signs I missed. Maybe I just hope at least one person in the world won't think I'm an evil piece of shit for what I'm about to do. Maybe I'm just using this to delay the inevitable. And once I've done what I know needs to be done, I'll come back and I'll type up an update for what happened. But Sarah, if you're reading this, I'm sorry. I'm so fucking sorry. I remember the night it happened so clearly. I'd been living downtown. I was sleeping, but exactly at 3 a.m, I was woken up by a deafeningly loud sound, almost like a horn, blaring into my ears, and the most violent earthquake that I'd ever felt, as if the ground itself were falling apart. Just as it had come, the noise and rumbling ceased. I looked out my window and I couldn't see anything. A dense fog had come in, so thick it looked as if someone had glued a bunch of pillow stuffing to the outside of my window. I could hear people talking down in the streets, and I went back to check out what was going on, thinking a massive earthquake had just hit us. Multiple people were gathering across the street, talking to each other. Their voices were riddled with confusion. Some were frantic, talking about how one of the buildings had vanished. I saw where apartment 426 used to be. There was just an empty lot now, as if nothing had ever been there. In the middle of the night, across the street from me, a 7-story apartment complex had completely vanished, along with everyone inside of it. Now, the police, they searched for months. The story was all over the news. The missing posters of the 200 tenants of apartment 426 littered the streets. Cops were everywhere, desperately searching for all those people, but life moves on. I mean, there never came any leads to the case. The police got others to investigate. People moved on. Now all that remains from that night are the memories of those who went missing. It wouldn't be until years later that I got any real clue as to what happened. I was over at my father's house drinking with him and one of his buddies. The guy used to be a cop. The topic of disappearances came up. Now, I asked him if they ever found apartment 426 or any of the tenants. His face, it twisted into a grim expression. He leaned forward before speaking in a hushed tone. Look, I'm not really supposed to talk about it. But it's been years, and I trust neither of you will say shit to anyone. We found the building. It was a couple of months after the whole thing went down. One of the cops was at the lot where the building used to be when his radio picked up a stray signal. He said it was hundreds of people screaming all at once, like the sounds of hell were coming through his radio. We all assumed the signal was coming from inside the building and that it proved our theory that it had somehow sunk into the ground. So we brought in a ground-penetrating radar.
lo and behold, there it was. 200 feet beneath the surface. Funny thing is, we'd already done scans when it first happened. Hadn't been there. So why was it there now? Anyway, they drilled into it from a nearby metro station. Took them months. They weren't really hoping to find anyone alive. I mean, they knew how slim the chances were. If those people hadn't run out of food, they would have run out of air. Guess I just wanted to know what happened. The thing is, when they finally got in, it was completely empty. Not a fucking soul. Space was completely sealed, no exits. Trust me, they looked. It's as if everyone that was in the building just up and vanished without a trace. Actually, it's not entirely true, because they did find one of them a couple months later. They excavated an old stone foundation in the old port. They hit something soft. The guy gets out, and just blood everywhere. The excavation shovel had cracked open one of the huge boulders, and there was this guy fused in there. It gets weirder because the guy's skin was fucking translucent, like they could see everything inside him and shit. His blood is still warm, as if he'd just been alive. They've obviously freaked the fuck out. They call the police. They aren't really taking it all that seriously when they get there. I mean, I can't even blame them. I wouldn't have believed it myself if I hadn't seen it. I'm just about laughing in the guy's face until they see the guy on the rock. I was friends with those guys, and they told me that they'd never been that scared. Dude looked like a human-shaped sausage, like a clear casing. You see all his insides, part of him were completely fused with the rock, like there was no separation between where the skin started, where the rock ended. I kind of laughed at him at that point because I thought they were pulling my leg, but I mean, they looked so seriously at me that I stopped. I mean, I've never seen those guys like that. They were genuinely horrified. So they brought the body to the coroner, and he looked just as baffled, said he'd never seen something like that. 20 years of work there. So, what killed this guy? Turns out, blunt force trauma from the excavation shovel. I mean, how the fuck does that even make sense? Guy's encased in stone, right? How the fuck is he still alive? We had his blood, identified him as one of the missing people. We called his family to come and identify the body. And by the time they got there, he just up and disappeared again. Poof. Just like that, gone into thin air. We couldn't explain it. There were cameras all over the place. They caught nothing. We never found him again. Never found any of the others either. I quit after that. Couldn't really stomach it anymore. We sat in silence for a while, just thinking about what he said. I never heard this guy lie in my life, but what he just told us was completely nuts. Somehow I believed him. I mean, I was there that night. I saw that building vanish. I guess hearing it from his mouth with all the additional information, it made it too real for me. After a while, he looked up at us, plastered on a smile that didn't reflect his eyes. And he changed the subject to a completely different topic. I couldn't stop thinking about what he told us, so I just left shortly afterward. I'm back home now, and it's foggy as hell outside, and I got back at just the right time. Now, I'm writing this out for you guys because I can't get it off my mind. People have to know what happened to them, right? They had families, they had lives. I can't just let them fade away into nothing, so I'll try to uncover more for you guys. For their families. I promise to update you guys as soon as I can. It happened again. Another building went missing in the middle of the night. One minute it's here, the next it's gone. Last night it was my buddy's daughter who went missing along with her entire apartment building. They'd come over that very day to shoot the shit over a couple of beers. She'd asked about apartment 426, and since it happened so close to her, I told her everything I knew about it. Understandably, I think what I told her really freaked her out. And I tried to change the subject, but she and her dad, they left not long after. That very night, while I was getting ready for bed, my old police chief called me. He knew I was close with her dad, so he figured he'd call me, let me know what happened. He asked if I wanted to be a part of the search. I agreed. I was there when they interviewed the neighbors in the surrounding area. They all reported the same thing. A dense fog rolled in, and the ground shook violently, like the most violent earthquake they'd ever felt, followed by a deafening horn like that of a train, and then nothing. Everything went back to normal, and the world fell silent again, except once more an entire building had gone missing in mere moments. Everyone inside disappearing with it. And so we began the search. In much the same way as when building 426 went missing, this time it wasn't long before something was found. 2 hikers had called and reported seeing a building deep in the woods, just off an established trail. So we went looking. We found it. There it was. Its address is on full display, apartment 451. Nearly around 100 kilometers away from where it had stood. It had been a 10-story building, but only the first 2 floors were currently there. I was one of the first to go in, and the second I did, I could tell something was wrong. I mean, nothing so far had given me any doubt as to what I was doing. It had all been so procedural. But the second I stepped in there, the hair on my arm stood on end. Something about the place was completely off, something more than I was seeing. It was like every nerve in my body was telling me to get out. The first thing that hit me was the smell, like hot copper. The air was thick, heavy, almost kind of muggy, hot and humid. Despite it being midwinter and snow covered every inch outside. The floor plan was all wrong. I mean, doorways leading to nothing but brick walls and hallways that just ended abruptly. Trees were growing through the walls and ceiling like they just phased through everything. I opened one of the doors and it led outside despite being a normal room door with a number. There was an elk there, standing still, completely frozen. Had this look of pure terror on his face. But it wasn't looking at me. It was looking past me, like it could see something behind me. Something I couldn't see. Another officer called out to me, and in the brief moment when I looked away, the elk disappeared. And I don't just mean walked away. The tracks walked up to the doorframe and just they ended there. Everything went to shit after I went to the second floor. I wish I hadn't gone up. I really wish I hadn't. When I went up, It had no roof, the walls ended slightly above my head. I heard crows above me, and I looked up into the trees that had gone through the building. God, they were all up there, over 100 of them, up in the branches, writhing, moaning in pain. Every tenant of apartment 451 was up there, alive, suffering. Some look as though their skin had been peeled from their flesh. Most of them were missing limbs, pieces of their bodies, all ending in straight edges, as though they'd been cut off in one straight motion. I saw her up there too. What was left of her. She'd been cut cleanly in half, just above the hips. Her guts dangling down. Crows were pecking at them. I called her name, but she turned her eyes to meet mine as she mouthed for me to help her. I took a step back and my foot sank into something soft. I looked down to see a man half sunken into the floorboards, his skin translucent. It reminded me of that other one that we'd found encased in stone. He screamed and they joined him, screaming in this deafening unison. And it got foggy. Out of nowhere, just appeared at its seconds. I couldn't see 5 feet in front of me. That's when the building began to shake violently. It nearly threw me to the ground, but I caught myself. I knew what it all meant, so I headed for the exit as fast as I could. I called out to the others to hurry, to get out. And as I exited behind one of my coworkers, my foot snagged on the door frame. I fell hard, knocking the wind straight out of me, but the worst part was that blaring horn. It felt like someone was holding a train horn right next to my ear. I held my hands to my ears. Just as soon as it started, it fell silent again. When I rolled over onto my back, the building vanished once more, and my foot that had been caught in the doorframe, it was gone. It didn't bleed, it didn't hurt. My leg just ended in a straight edge right above my ankle. I looked around. I noticed that only the officer who'd exited before me remained. The other three, they hadn't made it in time. I knew them well. They'd had families. They'd been good men. They didn't deserve to never see their children grow up, never to grow old. Look back at all they'd accomplished. He took me to the hospital. They couldn't explain it any more than we could. He wasn't cauterized. It was just an open wound, yet didn't bleed. I found her post. I'm writing this in her honor. She was right. People need to know. My apartment 451 wasn't the first. And I doubt that it'll be the last. Personal log. Our expedition to explore SCP-354, that gaping wound in the middle of Canada, has finally been accepted. The R&D boys have come up with what can only be described as a submarine with a drill on it. We know that the pool gets denser as you go down, so we suspect that at some point we won't be sinking so much as digging. Hence the huge mining device built onto it. It's not hydrodynamic at all, but we're not really going swimming here either. My gut tells me that there's something on the other side of the red pool, just like digging down, digging up to China. All we have to do is dig down, or up. Personal log. Had a nice long debate with O5 over who's allowed to come. I want MTF Omega-7 to come with us for protection, or at least SCP-076.
but they won't allow it. Despite the massive damages he continues to cause, they still see him as too valuable to risk losing. Not that he isn't, immortal or anything. Maybe they just didn't have the guts to ask him to go exploring. Ackler, that ass, wanted us to take another SCP with us, but I wouldn't allow it. Fowl says that SCP was just born before he came through, so he'd be useless as a guide. He might be some sort of use as security, maybe, but that's mostly canceled out by the fact that he is, The final crew, complement apart from myself, consists of 3 agents, 2 D-class personnel, 1 geologist, and some guy from R&D, one who's going to be piloting the ship. I already forgot all their names. Exploratory Team 354 Alpha, ET-354A, Mission Log, Day 1. Rotten sort of day to begin a mission. Rumor has it that the last night there was a total contamination breach in some area or other. Then it turns out there's no coffee allowed anywhere inside of Area 354 for some reason or another. And the whole mission almost ended in disaster when it turns out that they almost forgot to load the extra fuel on board. Like, who the fuck is running the show around here? Anyway, now we're underway. For a while there, I had a definite feeling of going downward, but now we're dropping much slower. Marty, that's the R&D guy, says that we're sinking at a rate of 10 meters an hour. Apparently at this depth, the red pool it's pretty dense. ET-354A, mission log, day 2. Nothing of interest happened, but I learned everyone's name, so, we have Marty, our pilot, Agent Swanson, Agent Turquoise, Agent 86, Dr. J. MacArthur, Chris Simmons, and Leroy Tucker. Whoop-de-frickin-do. ET-354A, mission log, day 3. It's about 4:30 a.m. Gravity suddenly changed direction. Boy, that was fun to wake up to. We're now rising rather than sinking, which means we're more than halfway there. ET-354A mission log, day 4. We've reached the surface. Through the portals is mostly dark, which means it's night. Can't go out yet because of, for all we know, the atmosphere could be hydrochloric acid. We've got a shitload of sensors outside the ship analyzing a bunch of stuff. Whether the air is breathable, what kind of airborne bacteria we have to deal with, simple stuff like temperature. We'll know in 8 hours whether it's safe for human life out there. ET-354A mission log, day 5. It turns out the air is totally safe, except it's been night for going on 28 hours now. What's going on? ET-354A mission log, day 6. Dawn finally came. The sun was huge, red. I'm a biologist, but I know enough about astronomy to know that we're orbiting a totally different star. It's a different time, a different place, or a different dimension. Who knows? Leroy guessed that we're on another plane of existence. I think he's probably the closest. The pool on this side is way bigger, more like a large pond, maybe a small lake. The banks are more defined than on our side as well. We took an inflatable raft to the shore. Marty and Simmons stayed behind. They headed north. The ground here, at least around the pool, it's almost totally devoid of plant life. The only green we saw was a sort of fuzzy moss growing on the ground that looked more like a kind of mold. The ground is grayish, tan dirt that's like a mixture of sand and flour. MacArthur said it was the same mineral, or another, but I forgot what he called it. I half expected all of our electronics to not work out here, but that wasn't the first thing to fail. After about 2 hours of hiking across flat, boring ground, the compass suddenly changed direction. Now pointed to what we had previously thought to east. Evidently, this planet's magnetics is... Is it even a planet? They don't work the same way that ours do. Not wanting to risk getting lost, we immediately made a 180, headed back to the ship. Could have sworn the trip back was less than half as long as the trip out. Tomorrow we'll work out a way of navigation that doesn't rely on the compass being sane. ET-354A mission log, day 7. Lousy night's sleep. The sun never went down. And by my calculations, the day-night cycle here seems to last 43 and a half hours, as opposed to like our 24 hours back home. That takes some getting used to. We agreed on a system of navigation. Firstly, we're going to travel only in a straight line to make sure that we can get back to the ship, or simply turning around, heading in the other direction, unless we encounter some kind of unnavigatable jungle, then, we should be fine. Second, Marty's rigged a radio beacon thing. I don't really remember his explanation, but if we're anywhere within 800 miles, this little gizmo, it should be able to tell us exactly which direction to go to get back and exactly how far. ET-354A mission log, day 9. We set out a few hours before the sun was scheduled to rise. But when we got to the shore, we found that the green moss stuff was everywhere. It had grown in mass significantly. My guess is the stuff shrivels up in the sun during the day and expands at night, sucking nutrients or something. We decided we didn't want to walk through it, so we went back, waited for sunrise. Sun came up. We set out again. Moss stuff was back to its smaller state, and it's just occurred to me there's been no wind at all in this place. The result is dead silence. I'm not ashamed to admit that the overall emptiness of this place is pretty scary. We found an area with none of the moss stuff for a few hundred feet around and decided to camp for the night. Sun's still up, but it's time for us humans to sleep, so I'm calling it a night. ET-354A mission log, day 10. Sometime in the night, which was really daytime. Fuck, it's gonna get confusing. We were all awoken by some kind of roar. I remember when that T-Rex sounded like in that old Jurassic Park movie. It sounded like that. It was big, it's reptilian. And it was so loud, I was certain whatever was making it couldn't be more than 20 feet away, but when we all got out of our tents, we didn't see anything. The whole area is so flat, we'd see any sort of animal within half a mile or so. There's just nothing. It's fucking scary. We packed up camp, we continued on. After a while, we stopped seeing the moss stuff. And maybe it only grows around the red pool. The ground became rockier, and in the distance, the land seemed to grow more hilly. I think I see trees. ET-354A mission log, day 11. The bare ground has ended. Now we're walking across a vast field of beautiful green grass. Almost looks like a well-mowed lawn. The grass seemed ordinary enough till Turquoise tripped over a rock and arose to find his hands covered with several dozen bloody pinpricks. Apparently the tips of a blade of this grass is just incredibly sharp, easily punctures the skin. It's no threat to our Foundation issue boots, but we're all going to be careful not to fall on it. We came to a tiny stream, no more than a trickle really. Swanson suggested we could refill our canteens. Leroy and MacArthur wanted to check the water for something or other first. MacArthur took out some equipment and after a few minutes announced that it was not water. It was liquid carbon dioxide, CO2, usually a gas at this temperature, and never a liquid. So the laws of physics don't seem to be working right. ET-354A mission log, day 14. I haven't had time to record anything for a few days. Made it to an area sparsely populated by trees. The grass there withered and brown, not sharp enough to pierce the skin anymore. The trees were ordinary. like birch. The leaves, they were all wrong. At some point we lost Swanson. The place is so quiet, none of us really feel comfortable talking, so I have no idea when we lost him. Good 8-hour window where he could have gone missing. We called to him, but none of us wanted to split up to look for him. During the night, a tree fell on 86's tent. He wasn't hurt. None of the gear was damaged, although the tent got mangled beyond repair. 86 swears that the tree hadn't been that close when he pitched the thing, and no one of us could tell what caused it to fall. I mean, the trunk had just, snapped. So we all agreed not to pitch our tents anywhere near a tree from now on. The next day, which was really nighttime, we heard the same roar from a few days ago. It sounded exactly the same as before, and again, we had no idea what made the sound. None of us could even agree which direction it came from. And then it started to rain. We all pitched our tents for the night, this time a whole lot closer together than we had before. The nearest tree was about 300 or so feet away. MacArthur confirmed it was actually rain and not more CO2 bullshit. We all set up this funnel thing to refill our canteens. Leroy donated his tent to Agent 86. I offered to share mine since it's a little bigger than the other guys. I asked Leroy what he did to wind up as a D class. He said that he'd raped a couple of people. I think he might have been trying to freak me out, but who knows. Anyway, he's one of the most well-behaved D classes I've ever met, so I don't think he's gonna say assault me in my sleep. ET-354A, mission log, day 17. God, the rain finally stopped. Everything's soaking wet, including us, except for the ground. After that much water, you'd expect it to be muddy as all hell, but the ground beneath the grass is barely damp at all. As the plants absorb moisture from the ground more efficiently than the ones back home, they're setting out again. Perhaps the rain awakened some animal life. And mission log, day 25. What seems to be a huge cliff in the distance turned out to be an artificially constructed wall. It's made of solid rusty iron, and it stands maybe 15 feet high. To the left and the right, it goes on farther than the eye can see it. Can't imagine how thick it is. We have no way around it. Have to go over it or through it. We made camp for the night. We'll look out for what to do in the morning. ET-354A, mission log, day 26. Leroy jerry-rigged some kind of blowtorch thing with our equipment. I swear the guy's a fucking MacGyver. We cut a hole in the iron wall big enough for us to go through. Turns out it's only about 1/4 of an inch thick. There's another wall behind it with less than a foot between. Apparently this thing has multiple layers, so Leroy cut through 8 of them before we finally made it to the other side. The grass on this side is black. It's not burnt or anything, it's just a different color. Finally there's some wind. It's getting tired. Concluded that coming here was a mistake. We have to head back. ET-354A, mission log, day 39. Passed through the second barrier. We're back at the weird place with the black grass. I half expected the hole Leroy cut through it to have sealed up or something, but it's still there. Thank God, or whoever runs the show in this world. I don't think MacArthur's going to make it through the night. He's lost a lot of blood. ET-354A, mission log, day 40. We awoke to find that MacArthur had crossed. We didn't want to do it, but we had no choice but to terminate him. 86 says that something back home might be able to help him. He may have been right. We couldn't afford to have him slow us down. We only had a few more days until day 48. We made it back to the ship with only an hour or two to spare. The first thing they asked us was what the fuck happened to Swanson, Turquoise, MacArthur, and 86. As if a few dead team members are our biggest problem right now. Marty has us underway, and we're definitely sinking. I hope they don't... End of log. This document was discovered in the Central Foundation database. No such mission to explore SCP-354 has yet been suggested or proved. No records of any personnel mentioned in the log exist. The log's origin is unknown.
Hey there kids, it's me, Mr. Creepypasta, and before we say goodnight, I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching tonight's video, or for listening to tonight's episode of the podcast, if you were listening to the podcast on Spotify or wherever you get podcasts, or if you're watching the video on YouTube, which is the only place where I post videos. I really appreciated you guys, and I'd appreciate if you hit that thumbs up, you hit the subscribe button, and you hit the bell thing next to the subscribe button. As always, I want to give a very big thank you to everybody who supports me on Patreon, patreon.com/MrCreepypasta. That is the main place you guys are able to support me if you guys want to be able to support me, which you absolutely don't have to do, but hey, thank you. And especially if you guys like, you can become one of these wonderful people whose names I mispronounce. People such as Diana Kraus, Acid System, Benjamin 2003, Blake Rattler, Bottle Coolant, Brandon Mendoza, Caltuna, Corey X Kenshin, Dakota Best, Daniel Polson, Dante Kincaid, Enchanted Buns, Eric Anthony Caruso, Estebeam, 15 Squirrels in a Trench Coat, Galaxy Gremlin, Hayes Nephew, Himbo Jerry, Our Minute Second Time, Jay Kearns, Jed is Pet, Lou Cipher, Nick MC, Plant Piss, Red Shadow Cat, Remember the Sun, Salty Surprise, Samara Lynn, Scary Stories Fuel Me 32, Seclude, Simba's Bloody Mojo, Sky Harbor, Smiley the Psychotic, Sully Man, Holly Sue, Team Leo 76, The Chavez Brothers, The Ginger Bros, Tommy Walters, Viceroy Scorn, William Wellington, X Reaper 69, XX Lucky Cat XX, Zabol, Shadow Gardens, and Peaceful Buddha. Thank you all so much for being here. And as always, sweet dreams.